Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The hall is holding its breath when the hat whispers in Harry's ear. Not Gryffindor, not yet. Just that soft, insistent murmur. You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. In canon, this is the moment he begs. Not Slytherin. In this timeline, he hesitates, hears the word greatness, and instead of fear, something else stirs. Curiosity. Defiance. A need to prove he isn't just a scar and a story. What if you put me in Slytherin? He thinks, very clearly. The hat still warns him. Still lists the snakes and the shadows, the dark wizards and the whispers. But because it also sees ambition coiled beneath his hunger for belonging, it doesn't fight him when he makes a choice. Harry Potter, 11 years old, makes his first conscious stand against the path everyone expects. He doesn't plead, "Not Slytherin," he says quietly, "Slytherin." The hat shouts, "Slytherin," and for a heartbeat, the Great Hall doesn't react at all. It's as if the magic itself has glitched. Then every table erupts. But not in the way the canon story taught us. Gryffindor's cheers die in their throats. Ron's face falls so fast, it's almost comical, if it didn't hurt. Hermione's eyes go wide, already recalculating every book she's ever read about house reputations. At the staff table, McGonagall's mouth becomes a thin, disbelieving line. Dumbledore's hands still come together in polite applause, but the twinkling in his eyes dims, just a fraction. This isn't a story about a hat gone wrong. It's a boy refusing to be steered. Means he is suddenly not the safe, Gryffindor-shaped symbol everyone thought they were getting. Down at the Slytherin table, there's a scrape of benches as students lean forward, drawn by the gravitational pull of a legend in green and silver. Draco Malfoy recovers first. His slow, disbelieving grin spreads as Harry walks past the Gryffindors he was supposed to call family, and sits down beside him instead. On the other side, Crabbe and Goyle stare with the wary confusion of guard dogs who've just been handed a very famous kitten. Around the hall, whispers crackle. The boy who lived. In Slytherin, does this mean, you can almost hear the word no one wants to say, heir. Snape's reaction is the quietest and therefore the loudest. No dramatic start, no theatrical sneer. Just the barest lift of an eyebrow, the tension in his shoulders loosening by a degree as his promise to protect Lily's son collides with the reality that the boy is now in his house. This changes everything. It changes how closely he can watch Harry. It changes what Voldemort might hear. It changes which corridors feel safe. By the time the desserts appear, the boy who lived is ringed by green ties and silver badges, his black hair a dark blot among pale faces. Somewhere near the doors, a first-year Hufflepuff whispers, "Dark Lord's heir," and the phrase slithers from bench to bench until it reaches Harry's own ears. He doesn't flinch, but he files it away. Is this where he saves lives from inside the snake pit, or where he's slowly poisoned by it? So, let's explore the night Hogwarts rewrote its war lines, and what it means when your hero grows up in the house everyone else has been taught to fear. Rewinding the hat's whisper, the exact divergence point. The hat's voice is already in his ear when the timeline shivers. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent and a thirst to prove yourself. Canon gives us this moment word for word. The hat leans towards Slytherin. It tells him, clearly, you could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. In the original story, Harry's answer is almost a flinch. Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin. A child begging the universe not to confirm his worst fear about himself. But because he grew up a Weasley, the fear lands differently. On the train, Draco's insult to the Weasleys didn't just sting. It hit family. It hit Mum's second-hand robes, and Dad's singed fingers, and Ron's tight, embarrassed shoulders. So when the hat hisses, Slytherin, Harry doesn't simply recoil. He hesitates. He thinks of Draco's offered hand, of Ron's offended silence, of Percy's muttered warnings about Slytherin House. He thinks of the way the whole compartment went still when Malfoy spat the word, blood traitors. And instead of not Slytherin, he thinks, very softly, what if I could change it from the inside? This is the exact divergence point. Not a different hat, not a different school, just a different sentence in Harry's head. Canon insists that choice matters. The hat tells him, I'll put you in Gryffindor if you really want. In our timeline, Harry's rejection slams the door on Slytherin. In this one, curiosity props it open. He doesn't embrace darkness. He questions inevitability. The hat feels that shift. Choice for it isn't about volume. It's about direction. A desperate anywhere but there is resistance. A focused, what if I fix it, is permission. That one altered thought gives the hat all the justification it needs to follow its own cold logic without breaking canon. Ambition? Check. Resourcefulness, stubbornness, a mind that already thinks in terms of systems and how to bend them. Check. The hat was always right that Harry would do well in Slytherin. Now it also has his consent. Up at the staff table, there's another tension quietly snapping into place. Dumbledore, in canon, is relieved by the scarred boy in scarlet and gold. The symbol fits the narrative. The boy who lived, Gryffindor's heir, James's son in James's house. This isn't a story about house points. It's a story about control of meaning. Dumbledore needs a Gryffindor hero to steady a frightened world. The hat needs only to be accurate. When it shouts Slytherin, that difference becomes a fault line. It means Dumbledore's gentle hope for a manageable symbol collides with a child the hat has placed where his traits, not his optics, will flourish. It means future arguments about risk, about trust, about how much darkness a savior is allowed to carry, start right here on the stool. So who is this Harry? The one who asks to change Slytherin rather than flee it? Is he more ambitious, seizing the chance to reshape a house and a legacy? Is he more desperate to belong, willing to walk into the snake pit just to prove his family isn't wrong about him? Or is he simply more honest about the shadows he feels under his own skin, refusing to pretend they aren't there? This changes everything, but not all at once. For now, it's just a boy, a hat, and a single thought that will echo through every corridor of this new Hogwarts. Not a villain origin story, framing the thought experiment. This isn't a story about a green tie turning Harry's eyes cold overnight. The hat's shout doesn't rewrite his soul, it just drops him into a house where everyone assumes they already know how this story ends. So let's explore what we're actually doing here. First, Slytherin does not equal evil. Canon is very clear. The hat offers Harry Slytherin because he sees ambition, resourcefulness, and a stubborn determination to survive. That same stubbornness kept a starving child alive in a cupboard. Ambition, in this timeline, means he wants safety, belonging, and control over his own life. It does not suddenly mean he's eager to curse first years for fun. This isn't a story about Harry waking up and deciding, Dark Lord sounds nice. The The house values sharp minds and sharper instincts, not cruelty as a hobby. There are Death Eaters in its history, yes, but there are also students who just want top marks, good jobs, and parents who stop comparing them to the Malfoys at dinner. Second, the constraints. Harry is still the boy from the cupboard. He's still abused, still lonely, still the boy who lived. The hat's decision doesn't erase 10 years of neglect. It redirects how he copes with it, means he hoards information the way he once hoarded food, means he measures every kindness, wondering what it will cost, means he learns very quickly that in Slytherin you do not show weakness unless you trust the person watching. Because he's in Slytherin, the costs hit harder and earlier. Staff who already dislike the house now see Potter stitched to green and silver and flinch. McGonagall watches him with worry she can't quite voice. Snape, who promised to protect Lily's son, suddenly has that son sitting under his nose in his own house, and every sneer has to be balanced against the fact that Harry is now his responsibility. Students gossip. The boy who lived walked past the Gryffindor table and sat with Draco Malfoy. What does that mean? Older Slytherins with Death Eater parents feel entitled to his attention. They test him with jokes about muggles, with casual slurs, with questions about how it felt when our Lord tried to kill him. The emotional strain of that is real. At 11, Harry is already carrying the prophecy he doesn't know about. In this timeline, he also carries the constant suspicion that he will become the next Dark Lord, long before he's mastered Wingardium Leviosa. So let's be clear, this isn't a story about Voldemort's heir. This is a story about whether one abused child in the Ron house can pull Slytherin's legacy toward the light, or whether that legacy drags him under instead. Can he protect his own soul while navigating friendships with people canon Harry only ever fought? Or does survival in this dungeon demand compromises that change him forever? The promise to you is simple. We're going to respect canon personalities. Draco will still be Draco, Snape will still be Snape, Dumbledore will still play his long game. Stakes will stay high. Death, war, and trauma do not vanish because Harry wears green. And Slytherins will be treated as complex people, petty, brilliant, frightened, brave, rather than caricatures hissing in the background. This changes everything, but within the rules we already know. The next step is to walk Harry down those stairs to the Slytherin common room and see who he becomes when the snakes close ranks around him. Gryffindor's loss, Slytherin's gamble, redefining Harry's core. He walks down those stone steps in green, not red, and from the first night the world starts teaching him a different lesson. Canon Harry arrives in Gryffindor as a reluctant hero in training. He's brave because no one has ever told him his life is precious. He throws himself on chessboards, into forests, in front of killing curses, because at some deep level he believes he's expendable. Growing up in a cupboard means he craves belonging so desperately that Gryffindor becomes an instant home, a ready-made family he'll bleed for without thinking. But because this Harry sits at the Slytherin table, that hunger collides with a house that does not romanticize self-sacrifice. Slytherin teaches him very quickly that martyrs are only useful to other people's plans. Means he learns to count exits before he counts friends. Means he listens when older students explain which professors can be manipulated, which rules bend, which alliances keep you breathing. The Dursleys' neglect doesn't vanish in green robes, it mutates. Canon Harry responds to that deprivation by flinging himself at any hand held out to him. Hagrid's, Ron's, even Dumbledore's half answers. Slytherin Harry takes one look at Draco's polished offer of friendship on the train, remembers bars on windows and locked cat flaps, and thinks, what's the cost? He might still take Draco's hand, But it's a calculated experiment, not an instant bond. Trust becomes a resource, not a reflex. This changes everything about how he moves through danger. First year Harry in Gryffindor charges after the stone with a borrowed chess strategy and a lot of nerves. First year Harry in Slytherin still goes after the stone, but he goes with a map of the castle, a stolen schedule, and a quietly bribed portrait on his side. He doesn't stop being brave. He stops being careless. He's the boy who pauses at the trap door and asks, "Who benefits if I fail?" Loyalty, too, tilts on its axis. Canon Harry's house pride is almost automatic. Weasleys are safe, Gryffindors are us, Slytherins are them. In this timeline, house banners don't define his circle. He collects people instead. Maybe a sharp-eyed Slytherin girl who hates her father, a muggle-born who refuses to be intimidated, a disillusioned prefect, and once you're his, you are his. Betrayal becomes the unforgivable sin. Secrets are not just plot devices. They're emotional landmines. When someone lies to him for his own good, it doesn't just hurt. It reactivates every locked cupboard and slammed door. And love? This isn't a story about love softening him into a gentler, Gryffindor-flavored hero. When real, unquestioning love finally reaches this Harry through a mentor who doesn't use him, or a friend who chooses him over family, it doesn't make him less dangerous. It arms him. It means every plan from that point on has a non-negotiable clause. They live. His enemies stop being abstract dark forces and become specific threats to his people, and Slytherin has given him the tools to respond in kind. That's the unsettling heart of this what if. A Harry who learns to think in contingencies, who understands leverage and fear because he's seen them up close in his own common room, might be better suited for war than the boy who charged in on instinct. If he can anticipate how Death Eaters recruit, how Voldemort hoards secrets, how Slytherin house fractures under pressure, he can outplay them. The question is, when the war finally comes, does Harry Potter the Slytherin outthink Voldemort, or outgrow Dumbledore first? The answer starts with who he chooses to stand beside him at that table, from express to dungeon, mapping the new timeline. So, let's explore what this new timeline actually looks like. Not in vague Slytherin Harry vibes, but step by step, from the train corridor to the final battle. We start on the Hogwarts Express. Draco offers his hand, the way he always does. In canon, Harry turns away because Ron is there, because Malfoy already means enemy. Here, Harry is still wary. But when the Hat later whispers, "You would do well in Slytherin," he remembers that outstretched hand and the promise of not being alone. He says yes. This changes everything. From that moment, every familiar crisis tilts. First year, the hunt for the Philosopher's Stone doesn't begin with 3 Gryffindors sneaking around. It begins with whispers in the Slytherin common room that Professor Snape is after something Dumbledore is hiding. Harry hears them from a green and silver sofa, with Draco at one elbow and a suspiciously observant Blaise Zabini at the other. Means he brings questions to Snape as his head of house, not McGonagall as a distant authority. Quirrell still has Voldemort on the back of his head, but because Harry is in Slytherin, Quirrell has far more reason to test him, to court him, to see whether the boy who lived might be turned. Second year, the chamber opens. Parseltongue echoes down damp stone. In canon, Harry is feared. Here, he is feared by his own dorm. The moment the school learns he can talk to snakes, Slytherin House becomes a pressure cooker. Is he the heir, or their best defense against it? Does Draco defend his housemate in public and interrogate him in private? The suspicion doesn't just come from Gryffindor Tower. It seeps into the Slytherin dungeon, into the space where he sleeps. Third year, Sirius escapes. The Shrieking Shack confrontation still happens, but the path there is different. A Slytherin Harry has spent 2 years under Snape's protection, hearing his mother's name in clipped, reluctant sentences. When the truth about Sirius breaks, it's not only Harry's trust in adults that shatters, it's his understanding of what a Death Eater is, when the man who hates Sirius most is also the man who has quietly kept Harry alive. 4th year, the Triwizard Tournament turns the volume up on everything. A Slytherin champion, or a Slytherin cheat, depending on who you ask, throws the house into open conflict. The Yule Ball becomes a map of alliances. Who is seen on whose arm, who dares cross house lines to dance with Harry Potter the Slytherin. Voldemort still returns in that graveyard, but because Harry has been studying ambition and power from the inside, he reads that resurrection differently. Less prophecy, more politics. By 5th year, Umbridge arrives to reform Hogwarts, and the DA is no longer a Gryffindor rebellion in a cozy room. It's a cross-house conspiracy run by a boy whose own common room is quietly cheering for Voldemort, or quietly terrified of him. Snape's role sharpens, more overtly protective in private, more cutting in public, because he has to keep Harry alive and keep Harry credible as a Slytherin. Draco hovers between rival and reluctant ally, especially as the mark begins to creep toward his year. And through 6th and 7th year, every beat you know, the cave, the tower, the Horcrux hunt, the Battle of Hogwarts, gets reframed through this house. Does Slytherin evacuate, or does part of it stay and fight? Does the common room survive as a nest of future Death Eaters, or does it fracture into something new under the pressure of following Harry instead of Voldemort? This isn't a story about simply repainting Harry's scarf green. It's about whether Slytherin House itself survives this war as an institution, or whether the boy who walked past the Gryffindor table ends up destroying and remaking it from the inside. And to see that, we have to go back to that first train ride and sit down beside Draco Malfoy. Ambition has a price. New conflicts, not easy fixes. Harry sits down beside Draco Malfoy, and in that instant, he stops being just a boy and becomes a banner. In canon, the boy who lived in Gryffindor is a comforting symbol. He's brave, he's red and gold. He fits the story people want to tell themselves about good and evil. In this timeline, Harry in green and silver is an argument no one can agree on. To some, he's proof that the old whispers were right, that power corrupts, that the scar was a warning. To others, especially the more pragmatic members of the Order and the Ministry, he's a potential wedge. What if you can peel ambitious, disillusioned Slytherins away from Voldemort by rallying them around Harry Potter instead? This changes everything about how people look at him. The Great Hall doesn't just see a first year, it sees a referendum on Slytherin House. Parents write letters. Governors mutter. Fudge's office quietly files away the detail that the most famous child in Britain is eating under a serpent banner. Means he becomes political before he's even learned all his classmates' names. On the ground, in the dungeon, the pressure is more intimate and more poisonous. Harry's new roommates don't just want a friend, they want proof. Proof that the boy who lived believes in blood purity. Proof he'll sneer at Muggleborns with them. Proof he'll laugh when someone calls the Weasleys blood traitors. Draco, who offered friendship on the train, now tests him at every turn. Do you agree, Potter? Don't you think some people don't belong here? Upstairs, the other houses watch him pass in green robes and quietly close ranks. Hufflepuffs nudge each other and whisper. Ravenclaws take notes. Gryffindors, especially Ron, feel the sting of betrayal every time Harry walks past their table to sit with Malfoy. This isn't a story about easy acceptance. It's about a boy who wanted belonging and found himself branded instead. Teachers aren't immune either. McGonagall watches him with sharp, worried eyes. Flitwick is kind but cautious. Even Sprout wonders, in the staff room, how closely he should be monitored. Only Snape's scrutiny softens, and that's its own minefield. Then there's house loyalty. When Filch finds a cursed object in a Slytherin corridor, or when a slur is carved into a bathroom wall, the punishments tend to land collectively. All of Slytherin loses points. All of Slytherin is benched from Quidditch practice. Harry has to choose. Does he stand up for his housemates, even the ones who make his skin crawl? Or does he side with the broader school that already half believes he's a future Death Eater? Because every choice is evidence now. Every hesitation is a headline waiting to happen, and the antagonists are paying attention. Malfoy weaponizes Harry's uncertainty in front of their peers. A snide comment here, a staged scene there. See, Potter doesn't stop us. He's one of us. The Daily Prophet, hungry for sales and scandal, runs speculative pieces. Is the boy who lived following in you-know-whose footsteps? A photograph of Harry scowling in Slytherin robes becomes Exhibit A in the court of public opinion. A detention with Snape, a late-night corridor sighting, a single angry outburst. Each misstep is framed as proof of corruption. So, let's explore the cost. Harry gains cunning, access to secrets, a front-row seat to the making of Death Eaters. But because of that choice on the stool, he also gains isolation, suspicion, and a constant series of moral grey zones. Means every friendship is a test, every loyalty a risk. This isn't a story about Slytherin magically fixing Harry's problems. It's a story where the very house that could help him save people also tempts him to give up on them. And under all of that, the question keeps tightening. When the first real crisis hits Hogwarts, whose side does Harry Potter stand on? The house that claimed him, or the world that fears him? Red and gold versus green and silver. Themes of family, glory and war. So when that first crisis hits, the real tension isn't just tactical, it's thematic. It's red and gold versus green and silver, courage versus cunning, but not in the shallow house cup way Hogwarts tells its children. Canon gives us a very Gryffindor model of heroism. Glory is public, bravery is loud. Harry dives for the snitch, stands in front of trolls, walks into the Forbidden Forest alone because that's what lone heroes do. This isn't a story about simply repainting that hero in Slytherin colors. This changes everything about what bravery looks like, who gets protected, and whose sacrifices even get noticed. In this timeline, the core isn't hate the snakes less. It's love before hate, refracted through a house everyone's been taught to hate first. Harry's capacity for love doesn't shrink in green and silver. It narrows, then deepens. Means he loves his housemates first, the scared first years, the quiet half-bloods, even the Malfoy who's more performance than person. Means he learns to protect the people the rest of the castle assumes are already lost. Gryffindor teaches run at the danger, wand out, witnesses welcome. Slytherin teaches survive the danger, gather leverage, make sure it never reaches your family again. So, let's explore what happens when the chosen one is raised, socially, on the second lesson instead of the first. Is sneaking antidotes into communal potions more or less heroic than punching Malfoy in the face? Is feeding information to McGonagall through an anonymous tip braver than storming the third-floor corridor? Here, heroism goes collective. The dungeon isn't just a breeding ground for Death Eaters, it's a house full of children who know exactly what happens when their parents pick the wrong side in a war. Harry, growing up under that ceiling of fear, becomes the one who quietly rewires it. A whispered warning here, a study group that is absolutely not a resistance cell, except it is a pact that Slytherins look after their own, including the ones who want out. Pattern interrupt. Imagine a secret meeting in the Slytherin common room where the most radical proposal isn't dark magic. It's, what if we just don't become our parents? That's where the chosen one identity tilts. He isn't the golden Gryffindor champion bathed in applause after Quidditch. He's the contested symbol of what Slytherin will be in the next war. Voldemort's legacy, or its undoing. Snape sees Lily's eyes watching his house. Draco sees a threat to the Malfoy brand. First years see proof that being ambitious doesn't have to mean being cruel. And running beneath every year, every crisis, is one question: when family loyalty clashes with terror and power, which wins? Because Slytherin has its own version of family. The house, the bloodline, the old alliances. This isn't a story about Harry effortlessly redeeming snakes. It's a story that keeps testing whether the bonds he forges in the dark can outweigh the lure of safety, status, and fear when the dark mark burns and the war finally comes to collect. Into the dungeon, shifting from overview to lived experience. So instead of staying up in the clouds with theory and house politics, let's do something simpler. Let's walk with Harry down the stone steps, because this isn't a story about abstract alignments on a Hogwarts crest. It's a story about a boy with a too big trunk and a too thin wrist, following a line of green and silver strangers away from the candlelit hall he thought would save him. Hard cut. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. September 1st, 1991, 11:37 p.m., Slytherin Common Room. The first thing that hits him is the cold. Not cruel, just unapologetic. The air down here has weight. It smells faintly of damp stone and old spellwork, with a sharp mineral tang from the lake pressing against the windows. The light isn't golden, it's green, filtered through water and glass so that every face looks a little unreal, as if they're already half reflected. Canon Harry never sees this. Canon Harry climbs moving staircases toward a tower full of red hangings and crackling fires, where the air tastes of smoke and sugar and someone's smuggled biscuits. That warmth tells him who he is, a Gryffindor, a hero in training, a boy who charges forward because standing still hurts more. This Harry doesn't get that script. This Harry stands on the worn rug in the center of the Slytherin common room, listening. The ceiling is low, the couches are deep, the silver lamps cast pools of light that never quite reach the corners. Older students talk in low voices that stop when professors walk through and resume the second the door clicks shut. Laughter happens, but it's edged, private, shared between people who already know the rules. He's still Harry. Awkward, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting too fast because growing up unwanted means you map every room for danger before you breathe, means he keeps his hands close to his sides so no one can accuse him of touching what isn't his, means when Draco Malfoy throws him a quick, assessing glance across the room, Harry's first instinct is not to step forward and argue. It's to watch. What if survival here doesn't mean being the loudest? What if it means being the last one to speak? The prefect is explaining passwords and curfew. Harry hears almost none of it. He's cataloguing expressions, memorizing who leans toward whom, who laughs at whose joke. He notices the way some of the first years keep glancing at his scar, then away, then back again. Not awe, not exactly fear, calculation. This changes everything about how he understands fame. Later, in the narrow, cool first-year boys' dorm, the green light is dimmer, more distant. The beds have dark wood posts and thick curtains that smell of dust and something sharp and herbal from generations of cleaning charms. Somewhere overhead, muffled and rhythmic, he can hear the lake moving against the stone. It's almost a heartbeat, almost a warning. He lies on his back, curtains half drawn, listening to the water and to the careful rustling silence of boys who don't yet trust each other enough to snore. He thinks of the roaring fire he's not under, the tower he's not in, the friends he hasn't made. Has he just made the best decision of his life, or the last one he'll ever truly make for himself? And when something in the dark whispers his name back, will he even know which it is? The Malfoy offer reopened. Rewriting the train and first week, Harry's answer to the hat doesn't echo in a vacuum. It echoes backward, all the way to a cramped train compartment and a pale boy holding out his hand. Canon gives us Harry's instant recoil from Draco Malfoy. In this timeline, that moment bends. Harry is still the Weasley-raised kid who bristles at Weasley as an insult. But because he's already wrestling with the hat's whisper of Slytherin, Draco's offer on the Hogwarts Express doesn't feel purely offensive. It feels informative. So when Draco drawls, "You'll find some wizarding families are better than others," Harry doesn't bite back with open fury. He goes quiet instead. He files the sentence away. He's wary, yes, but he also hears the subtext. I know things you don't. I know how this world works. He doesn't take Draco's hand. He doesn't slam the door in his face either. He lets Draco sit. He lets him talk about houses, about Snape, about which professors you can push and which you never cross. It's not friendship, it's reconnaissance. Ron is there for all of it, still sharing his sandwiches, still laughing about chocolate frog cards. But every time Harry asks a follow-up question about Slytherin, Ron's shoulders tighten. When Harry says, "So not all Slytherins are Death Eaters, right?" Ron snorts, then sees Harry isn't joking. The laugh dies. An awkward silence settles. This isn't a story about instant betrayal. It's about hairline fractures that only show up when the pressure builds. Those fractures widen in the first week. In Potions, Harry watches Slytherins fall into formation around Snape with practiced ease. They don't just answer questions, they anticipate moods. One student passes ingredients down the table before Snape asks. Another murmurs the right answer near a floundering classmate, so he can parrot it and earn a rare, thin smirk. Harry's not impressed by the cruelty. He is impressed by the coordination. In Transfiguration, he notices how Draco swaps homework notes with a Ravenclaw under the desk. The quiet trade of information dressed up as casual conversation. In Charms, a Slytherin girl whispers, "Flitwick loves effort. Wave your hand even if you're wrong." It works. Harry earns points. He also earns a knowing nod from the Slytherin row. Draco recalibrates fast. Harry Potter in green and silver means he isn't a rival to be humiliated from across the hall. He's a prize to be won. So Draco turns the charm up. He casually mentions ministry gossip he overheard at dinner. He complains about his father's expectations in a way that's almost honest. Every so often, the mask slips and Harry sees a boy his own age, scared of failing a family that doesn't forgive failure. Those are the moments that confuse him most. On the other side of the hall, Hermione Granger is watching. She remembers Harry on the train, politely listening to Draco instead of rolling his eyes. She hears the whispers, "Slytherin. Potter. Dangerous." She sees him laughing, once at something Pansy says, and her stomach twists. What if the boy who lived is falling in with the wrong crowd right in front of them? Harry feels the judgment long before he understands it. The way conversations stop when he walks by in green. The way Slytherin gets spat out of otherwise kind mouths. This changes everything about his first impression of the wizarding world. Means he learns, from week one, that people will decide who he is before he opens his mouth. So, let's explore what happens when that resentment doesn't fade. And when someone far darker than Draco notices a Slytherin Harry Potter, a different kind of protection, Snape notices first, not the hat's hesitation, not the whispers. He notices the way the dungeon door clicks shut behind a trail of green-trimmed robes, and Harry Potter is among them. His worst memory and his only promise, wrapped in Slytherin silver. In canon, that first potions lesson is open warfare. Here, it's something stranger. Snape sweeps into the room, robes billowing, eyes already narrowed on the front row. But because Harry is seated at a Slytherin bench, next to Draco Malfoy and under the watchful gaze of half the house, Snape has to recalibrate on the fly. He still asks the questions. Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The words are a ritual he can't quite abandon. But the sting changes. The emphasis shifts from Potter to Mr. Potter, from public humiliation to a pointed, almost clinical test. When Harry stumbles, Snape's mouth curls, and then he redirects. 10 points from Griff, a tiny lethal pause from Hufflepuff for whispering. The barb lands on an innocent badger instead of the boy with Lily's eyes. This isn't a story about Snape suddenly becoming kind. He still sneers at untidiness, still flays Neville for a miscut route. But because Harry is in his own house, Snape can't perform hatred the same way. Every insult to Harry is an insult to Slytherin's prize catch. Every public attack risks questions from students whose parents wear masks. House dynamics drag him into a new role. Visible mentor, constant gatekeeper. He's the one who suggests that Harry partner with Theodore Nott in class, rather than with Crabbe, who has a habit of pocketing ingredients. He pointedly assigns Draco and Harry separate brewing tables when their bickering gets too sharp, then quietly pairs Harry with a competent, low-profile girl whose family kept their heads down during the war. On the surface, it's classroom management. Underneath, it's triage. Means he spends far more time standing behind Harry's cauldron than canon ever demanded, correcting his stirring with a brisk, "No, Potter, like this," hand briefly over Harry's wrist. Docking points for sloppiness when Harry cuts corners out of boredom, then adding, "You cannot afford mistakes," in a tone that doesn't match the words. Harry notices. How could he not? Why is Snape always there when he leaves the common room after curfew? Eyes flicking past him to the shadows behind. Why does Snape eviscerate him for talking to Marcus Flint, yet only raise an eyebrow when he studies with Blaise Zabini? At 11, he doesn't have the vocabulary for protective surveillance, but he feels the pattern. Punishments that hurt his pride, not his safety. Detentions that keep him in Snape's office on nights when the corridors feel watched, and Voldemort is watching through rumors and sympathizers. A Slytherin Harry is easier to guard in the dungeons under Snape's direct authority. This changes everything about the logistics of protection, but it also paints a target. Why is Severus Snape, reputed Death Eater, so invested in the boy who lived? Why does his disdain stop just short of cruelty? Pattern interrupt. Picture a quiet evening. No cauldrons, no audience. Harry sits rigid in the chair across from Snape's desk, a half-marked essay between them. Snape doesn't deduct points. He doesn't shout. He just says, in a voice flat as cold stone, "You will decline certain invitations, Mr. Potter." Harry frowns. What invitations? Snape's gaze flicks to the green serpent on Harry's tie. In this house, some offers of friendship are more dangerous than open enmity. Slytherin is not a safe harbor. It is a sea. You will learn to swim, or you will drown. Harry swallows. And you're teaching me to swim. Snape's lip curls. almost a smile, almost a snarl. "Do not flatter yourself. I am ensuring you do not disgrace my house. That is all." But because we know the promise he made on a hill under a darkening sky, we know it's not all. And Harry, watching those black eyes and hearing the warning under the contempt, starts to suspect it too. So, let's explore what happens when that suspicion grows, and when Voldemort finally demands to know where Severus's loyalties truly lie. Stone, not sword. Year One's mystery in green and silver. The first real clue doesn't come from a three-headed dog. It comes from a 7th year in green and silver complaining that Snape has another blasted shift guarding the 3rd floor death trap. This isn't a story about Harry stumbling blindly into danger because he can't mind his own business. In this timeline, Danger walks into his common room, drops onto a leather sofa, and starts grumbling about detention rotas. Slytherin access changes everything. Means he hears the gossip before Gryffindor even knows there is gossip. Older students talk more freely around the quiet first-year Weasley boy, who listens, nods, and files every word away. So, what if the stone mystery unfolds not in whispered corridors above, but in the cool echo of the dungeons? Harry hears about the restricted corridor weeks before Halloween. He hears that Snape has been seen limping back from it. He hears Draco sneer that Quirrell smells of garlic and fear, and he remembers Hagrid's slip about Vault 713. Draco becomes the second pillar of this investigation, though he'd insist he's the first. On the surface, he's in it for the glory. Imagine being the Malfoy heir who uncovers a dark plot right under Dumbledore's crooked nose. But because he's grown up hearing his father mutter about ancient protections and the Philosopher's Stone in the same breath as the Dark Lord, there's a tremor under the swagger. Something is at Hogwarts that even Lucius doesn't control. That unnerves him. Hermione arrives in this story later, and not as an eager co-conspirator. She's the girl who watches Harry and Draco exchange 2 quiet looks in Charms, who notices Harry's questions in class line up a little too neatly with the rumors, and who is deeply, profoundly offended by the idea of a life-extending artifact being hidden in a school. She doesn't trust Draco. She barely trusts Slytherin. But she trusts patterns, and the pattern here is bad. Ron hovers at the edges. He's still Harry's brother, still the boy who'd share his last chocolate frog, but now every scrap of information comes with a sting. Harry heard this in Slytherin. Harry can't tell him everything. What does that do to a child who has always feared being left behind? When Harry asks him to distract Percy so he can slip to the library with Hermione, Ron does it, but the favor tastes bitter. Canon gives us midnight escapades and a troll in the dungeon. This timeline gives us Slytherin tactics, eavesdropping behind half-open doors, helping older students with essays in exchange for gossip, quietly bending curfew, because Snape will look the other way if Harry's questions are sharp enough, means he pieces together the protections on the stone long before he sees them. Devil's Snare from Herbology, winged keys from Flitwick's offhand remark, a brutal chess set that makes Ron go quiet. By the time Harry faces Quirrell, he is not a boy shocked by a twist. He walks into that chamber knowing someone has been moving under Dumbledore's nose for months while the headmaster smiled and said, "You're safe here." He knows Snape isn't the villain. He strongly suspects Dumbledore isn't the whole hero. So when Quirrell hisses that Dumbledore is far away, Harry's fear is braided with something colder: confirmation. The adults have been managing him, not protecting him. What does a Slytherin-raised Harry do with that knowledge when a half-formed Dark Lord offers him power, truth, and a different story about what really happened that night in Godric's Hollow? We're about to find out how Slytherin methods reshape, First year Harry. By the time first year ends, we're not just watching a boy in green robes face down a possessed professor. We're watching a different Harry Potter being quietly forged under the lake. Canon first year Harry survives because he runs toward danger with his shoelaces untied. He breaks rules in broad daylight, drags Ron and Hermione along, and trusts that being brave will somehow be enough. In this timeline, those impulses are still there, but they've been retrained. He still goes after the stone, but he plans which prefects to distract, which password he's overheard, which teacher underestimates Slytherins enough to leave a gap. He's not less brave. He's brave with an exit strategy. Living in Slytherin means the background noise of his life is whispers, deals over homework, promises traded for introductions, Draco muttering about whose father sits on which board. It means Harry learns that secrets are a currency, and leverage is just information you haven't spent yet. This isn't a story about Harry becoming a tiny crime lord. It's about him realizing that in this house, you either learn the rules of quiet power or you become someone else's cautionary tale. So he adapts. He listens more than he speaks. He files away the way Pansy flinches when her mother's letters arrive, the way Theo Knott goes silent at the word Azkaban. He doesn't blackmail them. But because he could, because everyone knows he could, his housemates start treating him as dangerous in a different register. Not cruel, just equipped, and that changes how he sees adults. Canon Harry is slow to notice Dumbledore's chessboard until much later. Slytherin Harry feels it in his bones by Christmas. When you're in the suspect house, every twinkle reads as surveillance. The headmaster who trusts him but never really consults him feels less like a benevolent grandfather and more like another player with better pieces. Means he stops assuming teachers are on his side and starts asking, quietly, whose side they're on at all. Snape's protection becomes another puzzle. Detentions that are harsher in public but oddly instructive in private. A cutting remark about his fame, followed by a pointed lesson on shielding his mind. Harry walks away thinking, if even my head of house is double-coded, why should I hand blind trust to anyone? Out of that tension, a new identity starts to grow. He's the Slytherin who refuses to laugh when Crabbe hexes a first year, the boy who uses Malfoy gossip to quietly redirect bullying away from Neville in herbology. His peers don't know where to file that. Is he disloyal to the house, or redefining what Slytherin protection looks like? This changes everything for them, because it forces the question, what if ambition can mean protecting the weak as a long game, not exploiting them for sport? So, let's explore what that seeds. Is this Harry already on the path to becoming a different kind of leader? Not the canon Quidditch golden boy, but the strategist in the shadows, the one who can walk into a corridor and make 3 arguments vanish with a word. When the war comes, will the wizarding world even see him coming until he's already rearranged the board? Year 1 ends with a boy in a hospital wing bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing that power offered and power refused are both dangerous. The question is no longer, will Harry be brave? It's, who will Harry let see the plans he's already making? The heir suspect, Chamber of Secrets with the Parselmouth in Slytherin. Those plans meet blood on stone. The first attack comes on a damp, echoing evening when Harry is heading back to the dungeons with Draco and a knot of Slytherins. Mrs. Norris hangs stiff and grey from a torch bracket, eyes bulging, and the words are slashed across the wall in wet red. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. Canon gives us a corridor full of gasps and accusations scattered across 4 tables. Here, the whispers start in the shadows under the lake. Because in this timeline, the boy who lived sleeps beneath green hangings. By breakfast, The dungeons have decided, if there is an heir of Slytherin at Hogwarts, it must be Harry. Who else? He talks back to Snape and survives. He walks the corridors with Draco Malfoy at his shoulder. He has that scar, that history, that sense that rules are more flexible than advertised. This isn't a story about a frightened little lion cub being unfairly maligned. This is a story about what happens when the most famous child in Britain wears the serpent, and the castle is genuinely afraid he might deserve it. So when the dueling club fiasco explodes, it lands harder. Lockhart sends the snake at Justin Finch-Fletchley. Snape helps, and the serpent rears back, fangs bared. Harry reacts before he thinks. The hiss pours out of him, smooth and instinctive, and the snake lowers its head. In canon, the shock is that a Gryffindor speaks Parseltongue. Here, the Great Hall goes very still because, of course, the Slytherin Golden Boy speaks to snakes. This changes everything. It feels less like revelation and more like confirmation that the house has reclaimed its darkest legacy. The fracture lines inside Slytherin sharpen overnight. Some students lean into it. Pansy Parkinson starts watching Harry with thrilled, avid eyes, whispering that it is about time their house had someone properly terrifying. A few older boys stand a little closer in the corridors, testing how much reflected fear can protect them from detentions. Others go quiet when Harry enters the common room, hands tightening around quills, because if he is the heir, then Muggle-born attacks are not an abstract story in a book. They are a threat sleeping 3 beds away. And then there is the tiny, stubborn minority, the ones who have seen Harry pass notes to Hermione in Charms, or watched him drag a sniffling first year out of Peeves's range. Draco sits right on that fault line. House pride hisses that having the heir in Slytherin is power. His mother's letters about proper alliances do not exactly discourage the idea. But because Draco has watched Harry flinch at the word mudblood, because he has seen him slip extra parchment to a Muggle-born who could not afford it, the theory does not quite fit. Means he ends up in broom cupboards and unused classrooms with Hermione and a very tense Draco. Maps and theories spread between them. They plan in whispers, because if Slytherin is seen to investigate the chamber, it looks defensive at best, guilty at worst. Harry, who grew up learning that family means you protect your own, is now trying to protect his house and its victims at the same time, knowing he cannot publicly choose both. When he finally stands before the sink in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, Parseltongue burning on his tongue, the weight is brutal. If he fails, Slytherin will wear this stain forever, proof that the Serpent House breeds monsters. If he succeeds, kills the monster, saves the school, who will ever believe he was not the one who opened it? The tap grinds aside, stone spirals down into darkness, and the question waiting at the bottom is worse than any basilisk. Who is Harry Weasley if the world decides he is Slytherin's heir, no matter what he does next? Snakes, secrets, and reputation. The chamber's aftermath. He drops into that tunnel as the prime suspect. The boy the school already half believes is calling the monster with Parseltongue now walks willingly into the heart of Slytherin's legend. That changes the entire emotional temperature of the rescue. In canon, his bravery is framed as straightforward heroism. Here, every move is double-edged. When he tells Ron he has to go, it isn't just, "Ginny's my sister." It's, "If I don't end this, they'll never stop." He's not proving he deserves the lion on his chest. He's trying to prove he deserves to exist in green and silver at all. Means he carries not only Ginny's life, but the whole weight of Slytherin's reputation on his shoulders. And when he comes back, this is the pattern interrupt the school can't process. Harry Weasley, Slytherin's problem child, staggers out of the chamber soaked in basilisk blood, Ginny alive, Riddle's diary destroyed. The facts should be simple. He killed the monster. He saved students. He saved a Weasley. But because of who he is and where he sleeps, the story fractures immediately. Some students, especially in Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, whisper that this only proves he controlled the basilisk all along, that the attacks stopped because their master decided they should. Others, grudging and tense, admit he must have fought it, and then glance at the dead basilisk and wonder what kind of 12-year-old can duel a 1,000-year-old serpent and win. Fear doesn't vanish. It just changes flavor. The staff aren't immune either. McGonagall sees James's reckless courage and Molly's ferocious love and wants to claim this as a win for the Weasleys. Snape sees a Slytherin second year who can speak to snakes, wield a sword that should belong to Gryffindor, and walk out of Salazar's chamber alive. To him, this isn't a story about simple innocence. This is a flashing warning sign in the middle of his own house. Dumbledore's response is the most complicated of all. Publicly, he has to praise Harry. To do anything else would be monstrous. So he tells the Great Hall that Harry Weasley has saved them all. He restores Harry's wand, his status, his seat at the Slytherin table. But privately, his relief is braided with unease, because Slytherin's symbol just became more powerful. The boy who lived has now personally conquered Slytherin's monster in Slytherin's house. This changes everything about how the world will read that prophecy. So, let's explore the political fallout. For Draco and the other Slytherins, this is a brutal recalibration. On one hand, they are proud. One of theirs defeated the basilisk. No Gryffindor swooped in to rescue them. A Slytherin did. On the other hand, Harry's moral compass is clearly not aligned with traditional house ideology. He risked his life for a Weasley girl and a Muggle-born safety record. He uses cunning and resourcefulness, yes, but to protect the very people some of their parents sneer at. That creates fractures. Draco can't dismiss him as soft, but he also can't trust him as a pure ally. The younger Slytherins start watching Harry for cues, while the older ones report home that the Weasley boy in green is dangerous in ways no one predicted. And Harry himself? He comes out of this fixed in a liminal space, neither fully trusted nor fully rejected. Too Slytherin for the lions, too Weasley for the snakes, too powerful to ignore, too unpredictable to embrace. Means he is now uniquely placed to influence Slytherin from within, showing the younger years that ambition doesn't have to mean cruelty, but at a steep personal cost. Every step he takes will be watched. Every act of kindness will be suspect. Every mistake will be proof to someone that he was always the heir after all. The chamber is closed, but the question it opened about who Harry Weasley really is will haunt every corridor. And the next time Voldemort moves, that question is exactly what both sides will try to answer first. Trust on a knife's edge. Hermione, Ron, and the fractured trio. The chamber may be closed, but the fallout doesn't stay underground. It follows Harry up the stairs, into the Great Hall, and straight into the space between the three people who were supposed to be inseparable. What happens to a friendship when one of you sleeps under green hangings and the other two don't? What if the boy you die for starts learning how to lie with a Slytherin's precision? This isn't a story about Harry simply going dark because of his house. It's more complicated and more painful than that. Hermione watches him first, the way she always does, quill in hand, eyes narrowed, cataloguing every new edge in his voice. He shrugs off questions about what Snape is hinting at, about what Draco is hearing from home, about the whispers in the Slytherin common room after the chamber. It's Slytherin stuff, he says. You don't want to know, but because she's Hermione, that's the worst possible answer. It means she starts following the gaps. Why did Harry know where the hidden passage was? Why did that prefect nod at him in the corridor? Why does he flinch when she mentions polyjuice now, as if strategy has teeth? Her arc isn't a clean, heroic line. There's a night in the library where she slams her book shut and hisses, "You can't just decide which laws matter, Harry. That's not what we're fighting for." He fires back that Slytherins are already assuming he'll become the next Dark Lord. So if he doesn't use every advantage, what was the point of surviving the chamber at all? The argument burns hot, then burns out. She shows up the next morning with a stack of books on wizarding ethics and, very quietly, a bar of Honeydukes chocolate. She is choosing him. On purpose. Over canon prejudice. Over her own fear. Ron's journey is rougher, messier, and much louder. Growing up, Slytherin was the word you didn't say at the Burrow unless you wanted Molly to tut and Arthur to look tired. Now his brother, in all but blood, is sharing a table with Malfoy. Means he's sharing jokes with him too. Ron notices every time Draco leans in to mutter something that makes Harry snort. Every time Harry translates some bit of pure-blood etiquette that keeps them from walking into a trap. Every time Harry says, "I can't tell you who said this, but," and then offers information that clearly came from the dungeons. There's a brutal row after Harry uses a Slytherin contact to blackmail a ministry clerk into releasing Hagrid's case file. Ron goes scarlet and shouts, "That's what they do, Harry. That's how they start. You're going dark and you don't even see it." Harry shouts back about injustice and stacked decks and how nothing changes if they play fair while Death Eaters don't. It should end there. It almost does. But because they are who they are, it doesn't. They've already held Ginny's shaking hand in the hospital wing. They've already faced a basilisk together in this timeline, sprinting down collapsing tunnels, Ron's wand misfiring, Hermione's voice echoing in Harry's head through the notes she left. Shared fear has its own kind of magic, so the late-night fights keep happening, but they start ending in exhausted laughter. Ron admits he's jealous that Draco gets to see the parts of Harry's life he can't. Harry admits he hates that he needs Slytherin tactics to protect the people he loves. Hermione admits she's terrified of how good he's getting at it. They don't solve it. How could they? War is coming, and Slytherin's shadow is stretching over all of them. The question hanging between their beds in Gryffindor Tower and down in the Slytherin dorms is simple and terrible. When the sides are finally drawn, can a friendship built across house lines survive a timeline that will demand absolute loyalty from every side? So, let's explore what happens when that question stops being theoretical and the first real test arrives. The Prisoner and the Spy, Year 3 through Slytherin eyes. The first Azkaban wanted poster goes up in the Great Hall, and Slytherin reacts before anyone else even finishes reading the name. Sirius Black, escaped, alleged Death Eater, alleged Potter traitor. For some, it's an immediate thrill of chaos. For others, it's a cold hand around the throat. What if the most wanted man in Britain is hunting a boy who sleeps in the same dungeon as you? In this timeline, whispers at the Slytherin table turn sharp fast. A few older students smirk that of course Black would come for their Harry. It proves Slytherin matters. A handful of purist families trade quiet, vicious gossip about a once noble Black gone mad. But because Harry is theirs, because he wears green and silver, there's also a wary protectiveness. You don't have to like someone to understand that if a killer can breach Hogwarts for him, no one is actually safe. Snape feels that more than anyone. Canon Snape is already taut with old grudges and private oaths. Here, with Harry in his house, that tension turns into policy. Curfews in Slytherin are enforced down to the minute. Passwords change more often. His warnings to Harry about wandering the corridors are not just snide, they're edged with genuine fear. This isn't a story about a teacher who only cares because of a promise to a dead girl. This is a head of house who knows his most politically explosive student is now the most tempting target in Britain. Means he watches Harry in class, in the corridors in Quidditch strategy meetings, scanning for any sign that Black has made contact. Means he is twice as sharp with Draco and his crowd, because one whispered letter home could bring the entire Black family drama crashing through the doors. Then the Dementors arrive, and Howe's lines carve the fear into something uglier. In public, Slytherins mock the Gryffindors' reactions. They roll their eyes at Dean's shaking hands, at Seamus's pale face, at Ron's furious insistence that they stay away from Harry. But the first time Harry Weasley Potter collapses on the train, his screams echoing with a mother's death, that sound follows him down into the dungeons. It's one thing to jeer at Gryffindor nerves. It's another to watch your own seeker fall from the sky because the guards of Azkaban have decided to feed. Harry's vulnerability becomes the one crack no Slytherin can quite ignore. A third-year girl quietly adjusts their practice schedule, so he flies when Dementors are least likely to be near the pitch. A seventh year pointedly escorts him past the creatures on Hogsmeade weekends, pretending it's just about avoiding detentions. And when the shrieking shack night comes, Slytherin instincts hit hard. Harry doesn't lower his wand for Sirius Black just because Lupin tells him to. He demands proof, verifiable details about his parents, explanations that would stand up in front of the Wisengamot. He hears the story of Pettigrew and the Fidelius through the ears of a boy who has grown up watching how names, trials, and headlines can be manipulated. Clearing a supposed Death Eater isn't just about personal closure for him, it's a political earthquake. What does it mean if the Ministry locked up the wrong man for 12 years? What does it mean for Snape, for Dumbledore, for every adult who let that stand? So when Sirius slips through his fingers, the loss hits twice as hard. He hasn't just lost a godfather and a possible home away from the burrow. He's watched the adults around him prove again that they cannot or will not protect the truth. The Weasleys love him, Slytherin shields him, but the system is rotten. And as the train pulls away that summer, Harry is no longer just wondering whether his cross-house friendships can survive a war. He's wondering something much darker. When the next crack in the official story appears, will he still be willing to play by their rules at all? Cause and effect. How Slytherin shapes Harry's moral compass. So when Harry steps off that train after third year, he isn't just angry at the system, he's angry at himself. Because the real question chewing at him now is brutal in its simplicity. When did he start thinking like them? Canon Harry charges. He breaks rules on instinct, hurls himself between danger and the people he loves, and only afterwards does he think, was that smart? In this timeline, 3 years in Slytherin have rewired the order. He still wants to protect. He still loves fiercely. But the thought process has shifted. First, what's the angle? Second, who's watching? Only then, what's right? This isn't a story about Harry turning into Draco 2.0. It's about what happens when you take that same Gryffindor heart and drop it into a house that treats impulsiveness as a liability. So he still goes after the stone, still walks into the forest, still insists on saving Sirius. But because he's Slytherin, every mad dash is wrapped in contingency plans, alibis, and backup lies rehearsed in the mirror. Take a small moment, not a headline one. A fifth-year Slytherin has been hexing a terrified Hufflepuff first year, using Harry's name as a shield. Potter won't mind. Canon Harry would probably snap and hex him into next week. This Harry waits. He catches the boy alone, drops a photograph on the table, the bully's older brother, at a nocturne alley shop that would ruin the family if exposed. Harry doesn't threaten violence. He threatens exposure. The bullying stops. The Hufflepuff never knows why. On paper, that's a win. In Harry's head, it's a crack, because it was cleaner than a duel in the corridor. Means he goes to bed wondering, did I stop cruelty, or just become a different species of cruel? He tells himself he did what he had to. He also scrubs his hands longer that night, as if guilt was something you could wash off under hot water in the dungeons. Yet there are lines he will not cross, and Slytherin does not erase them. He will not endorse blood purity, even when silence would make his life easier. He will not use spells that maim, not on classmates, not even on Malfoy when Malfoy is begging for escalation. He will not let bystanders get hurt for the sake of a clever plan. That deep, marrow-deep hatred of cruelty, the thing growing up with the Dursleys carved into canon Harry, still exists here. It's just wearing green and silver. Ironically, the constant suspicion from other houses becomes a guardrail. Everyone already whispers that he's one bad day from going dark. That pressure means he clings harder to the core of himself. If they're going to watch his every move, then every move had better be something he can live with. But here's the knife's edge. Does learning to think like a Slytherin make him safer from Voldemort, or easier to recruit? When the war escalates and someone says, we might have to do something ugly to stop something worse, will Harry be the one arguing no, or the one explaining how to do it properly? So, let's explore what happens the first time Voldemort tests that new moral armor directly. A champion in green, Triwizard Fallout for Slytherin House. The first test comes in blue-white fire. Harry's name leaves the goblet, and for a heartbeat, the Great Hall forgets how to breathe. In canon, that shock skews toward Gryffindor, toward the boy they think they know. Here, the silence tilts toward the Slytherin table, toward a house that suddenly realizes its newest oddity has just become its public face. The whispers start before Harry even reaches the antechamber. Of course it's him, Potter again. Did you hear he speaks Parseltongue? But because he's wearing green and silver, the suspicion carries a different edge. Is this cheating? Or is this dark? Is this some Slytherin plot? When he disappears through the door, every eye in the room draws a line from his back to the Slytherin banner. Down in the dungeon that night, though, the mood mutates. At first, it's stunned silence. Then, a low, hungry roar. This isn't a story about quiet, embarrassed support. This is a house that has been called cowardly and corrupt for years, suddenly realizing the champion of Hogwarts is one of theirs. Banners appear almost instantly. Silver serpents coiled protectively around a stylized lightning bolt. Our champion, spelled out in emerald sparks. A few purists suggest darker slogans. Tracy Davis rolls her eyes and charms them into something McGonagall can't confiscate on sight. Publicly, Slytherin rallies hard. They strategize in study groups, diagram possible dragon tactics on parchment, argue over whether gillyweed is too obvious for a Blacklake task. Means he never walks to a task alone. There is always a knot of green robes around him, projecting unity. But privately, in corners and curtained beds, the questions turn sharper. If the Dark Lord is moving again, what does it mean that Harry Potter, Slytherin Harry Potter, is at the center of an ancient, binding magical contract? For some, it feels like protection. If Voldemort wants him, he has to deal with their house. For others, especially those with fathers who still bear the mark, it feels like a test. Are their families being maneuvered? Is Harry a weapon, a symbol or bait? Draco sits right on that fault line. On one hand, this was supposed to be his arena. The Triwizard Tournament is prestige, headlines a straight path to the kind of status Lucius respects. Seeing Harry's name in blue fire burns. On the other hand, a Slytherin champion who is already used to defying dark expectations. That's a very useful shield. Draco throws himself into advising Harry on etiquette, on how to play the press, on which judges can be flattered, and which must be impressed. Is it friendship, ambition, or self-preservation? Even Draco isn't sure. The other houses recalibrate fast. Hufflepuff's resentment, already stoked by Cedric's stolen spotlight, now carries fear. If Slytherin is openly behind Harry, what does that say about where he'll stand when the war comes? Ravenclaws split, some treating Harry as a fascinating puzzle, others quietly tracking patterns of dark magic around him. Gryffindor, though, feels the loss most personally. This was the boy who, in another timeline, would have been their seeker, their lion, their proof that bravery lives in second-hand robes. Some of them still cheer for him. Some decide the boy who lived betrayed them before he ever sat at their table. And over all of it, Voldemort watches. A Slytherin Harry at the center of this spectacle doesn't just shift school gossip. This changes everything about how the Dark Lord approaches recruitment, intimidation, and prophecy. The house that wraps itself around Harry now will be the house he tears apart later, because when Voldemort finally returns in that graveyard, the fracture line running through Slytherin will be ready to split wide open. Tasks, tactics, and temptations. The Triwizard through a Slytherin lens. So when the egg cracks and the dragons are announced, this Slytherin Harry doesn't just panic and hope for a last-minute miracle. He goes quiet, calculating. Because if the Dark Lord is watching, if the whole house is a fault line about to split, then every move in this tournament is a message. In canon, Harry survives the first task on raw nerve and a firebolt. Here, he survives because he has already turned Slytherin's greatest weapon to his own use. Information. What if, instead of Hagrid's accidental hint being his only lifeline, that midnight visit to the paddock becomes step 2 of a larger plan? Step 1 was in the common room, where he traded homework help to a 7th year for a cousin's ministry gossip, and promised to speak to Snape about a detention in exchange for a glimpse at a contraband dragon handling manual. This isn't a story about Harry becoming a little Death Eater. It's a story about him learning that favors are a currency, and he can spend them to protect the people he loves. Means he walks into that arena knowing there will be a horntail. Means he has rehearsed summoning in the dark, with Draco timing him and Pansy complaining about the scorch marks on the flagstones. Means when he flies, it's not blind courage, it's a calculated risk he's already priced. The Yule Ball, then, isn't a sweet, awkward Gryffindor coming of age. It's a Slytherin gala under spruce branches and fairy lights, and Harry walks in as the house's champion, every eye measuring him. Who does he choose as his date when every choice is political? What if he asks Daphne Greengrass, the quiet pureblood whose parents sit on 3 different boards, instead of chasing a crush he barely understands? Or, more dangerously, what if he arrives with Hermione on his arm, making a public statement that Muggle-born brilliance belongs at his side? Draco plays status games with immaculate robes and pointed sneers. Harry plays a deeper one, testing which allies are willing to be seen crossing old lines for him. The second task becomes a referendum on those choices. Canon Harry dives for everyone because he cannot bear to leave anyone behind. But because he's been marinating in Slytherin logic, he understands that who is tied to that lakeside statue will be read as a list of his true priorities. Does the lake hold Draco, proof that the Malfoy heir really is his closest friend? Ron, the brother who refuses to let a house scarf change their bond? Hermione, whose intellect has become the backbone of his strategy sessions. Whoever he pulls from the depths, Slytherin watches and whispers, that is who Harry Potter will burn the world to protect. By the third task, the maze is not a mystery. It's a board. Harry walks in with a mental map of alliances and potential betrayals, of which champions might cooperate, and which professors he no longer trusts. He plans for Krum's strength, Fleur's pride, Cedric's fairness. He does not plan for the man who has been shaping his choices all year. Even a Slytherin-trained mind cannot see through Barty Crouch Jr.'s polyjuice and layered manipulation. And so the graveyard hits harder. Voldemort rises, red eyes narrowing, and understands in a single terrible moment that his enemy is not a Gryffindor fool rushing in for glory, but a boy who has learned power, leverage, and loyalty in Slytherin's own halls. This changes everything about the duel that follows, and about the offer Voldemort is about to make. Heir or enemy? Voldemort's new obsession with Slytherin. Harry. Voldemort's wand is still warm from the duel when his mind makes a sharper calculation than any spell. The boy in front of him is bleeding, shaking, and Slytherin. Not just by talent, by choice. Canon Voldemort sees Harry as a fluke, a Gryffindor mistake that somehow survived. In this timeline, he's staring at a boy the Sorting Hat thought worthy of Salazar's house, a boy who then walked into the dungeon and stayed. This isn't a story about simple hatred. It's a collision of pride, insult, and opportunity. On one hand, he's furious. How dare a Slytherin child defy him in public, in front of Death Eaters and ancient magic? On the other, there's a twisted satisfaction. Hogwarts itself has admitted that the boy who lived shares his house's virtues. Ambition, resourcefulness, the willingness to do what it takes, means he can't dismiss Harry as a reckless Gryffindor martyr. Means he has to ask a different question: can this boy be turned? So Voldemort's tactics shift. Terror is still his first language, but now he seasons it with something more insidious: understanding. He starts speaking to Harry in that graveyard, and in every encounter after, as if they are two Slytherins above a childish war. Who else, he asks, knows what it is to be feared in your own common room? Who else understands using reputation as armor? He frames Dumbledore as the manipulative Gryffindor headmaster who will never truly trust a snake. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Harry in the dungeon, weeks later, opening a letter sealed with the dark mark. Not a threat. An analysis. Voldemort dissecting a recent attack, praising Harry's quick thinking, offering him a place among those who won't waste your talents. It's horrifying precisely because it doesn't sound unhinged. It sounds plausible. Death Eater families feel that shockwave first. For the Malfoys, the Knotts, the Parkinsons, Harry becomes a strategic question. Do you court him, in case the Dark Lord truly wants him as an heir? Or do you isolate him as the ultimate traitor, the boy who wears their colors while fighting their master? Draco's dinner conversations get tenser. Lucius praises Harry's dueling in The Prophet, then warns Draco that Potter is dangerous. Narcissa, watching her son watch Harry, quietly wonders which danger he means. This obsession reshapes Voldemort's entire war map. Instead of treating Slytherin House as a guaranteed recruiting pool, he treats it as contested territory. He plants more spies among the prefects. He pressures Snape to report on Harry's influence in the dormitory, not just his occlumency. Attacks are calibrated. A cursed broom for a Slytherin chaser Harry likes. A targeted raid on a half-blood Slytherin's parents. Each one a test. Will Harry retaliate for his housemates, or sacrifice them for the greater war? So, let's explore the real stakes here. If Harry fails to redefine Slytherin from within, If fear and blood purity win the dormitory whispers, Voldemort doesn't just reclaim a house, he claims an entire generation. This changes everything about the post-war timeline. Auror offices full of snakes, or Death Eater cells packed with those same children. The next section has to ask, what does Harry actually do, day by day in that dungeon, to make sure Slytherin doesn't become Voldemort's forever? The Prophet's favorite villain, media warfare against a Slytherin hero. Harry's first war isn't fought with wands, it's fought in headlines. The moment Voldemort returns in that graveyard, the canon timeline gives us a ministry in denial and a prophet eager to soothe its readers. In this what if, they have a sharper weapon, the boy who lived in green and silver. Slytherin witness claims Dark Lord reborn. One headline hisses, as if Harry's house affiliation is already cross-examination. Another wonders, ambitious Potter seeks power. Attention-hungry heir of Slytherin spreads panic. The implication is clear. He isn't traumatized, he's performing. This isn't a story about neutral reporting. It's a story about narrative control. Because Harry stood and walked to the Slytherin table at 11, every detail of his testimony is now framed through that choice. His scar hurts? Convenient. He saw Voldemort rise. How very dramatic. A Gryffindor Harry is reckless but honest. A Slytherin Harry, the prophet suggests, is calculating. Means he must be angling for influence, for sympathy, for something. And of course, Rita Skeeter smells blood in the water. Her quill doesn't just resurrect old Harry Weasley troubled Slytherin features, she escalates. She paints him as volatile and secretive, a boy who prowls the dungeons with a chosen inner circle whose influence over impressionable students from all houses is deeply concerning. She hints at whispered meetings by torchlight, at ancient rituals revived beneath the lake, at a Slytherin common room that has become the incubator of a new dark movement. She never quite says he's leading them. She just leaves enough space for the readers to finish the sentence. So, let's explore what that does to his daily life. Walking through Diagon Alley in green and silver, Harry feels the shift in the air before he sees it. Wizards folding their papers a little too slowly, eyes flicking from headline to house crest. A witch at flourish and blots pulls her child closer when he passes. In the leaky cauldron, conversations dip when he enters, then swell with forced cheer once he's seated. At Hogwarts, parents send owls. Some ask that their children be moved from classes he's in. Others demand to know why Dumbledore is allowing a Slytherin boy with you-know-whose attention to roam unchecked. Even some staff members flinch. A Hufflepuff prefect overhears a professor wondering, quietly, guiltily, whether Harry's presence in Slytherin means Snape has been compromised. McGonagall defends him in public, but in private, her questions are sharper, her eyes more searching. Has he been entirely honest? Is he sure what he saw? The adults who should protect him are suddenly weighing his house colors against his scar. Inside Slytherin, the reaction fractures the house. Some students double down on defensiveness and cruelty. If the prophet already thinks they're Death Eaters in training, why not lean into the performance? Draco makes pointed comments about controlling the narrative and using fear properly, half joking, half testing the room. Others are quietly furious. They've spent years insisting Slytherin isn't inherently evil, that ambition can mean healing, innovation, survival. Now their very attempt to help Harry, sharing notes, backing his story, gets twisted into proof of a conspiracy. For Harry, growing up Weasley means he knows how to love before he knows how to hate. Means he understands family loyalty before individual glory. But because he chose Slytherin, he's learning that sometimes love isn't enough to cut through a headline. He realizes slowly and then all at once, that he isn't just fighting Voldemort. He's fighting a story that paints every Slytherin as the enemy, including the boy who's trying to save them. And if the prophet can turn him into the villain this easily, what happens when Voldemort starts telling his own version of events? Umbridge in the dungeon. Year 5's authoritarian clampdown. So when Dolores Umbridge totters into the Great Hall in her pink cardigan and sugary smile, she thinks she knows exactly where her power base is. The Ministry's woman. The Minister's narrative. The house that produced Voldemort. In her mind, Slytherin is already hers. Except, in this timeline, Slytherin's most famous student is the boy calmly insisting the Dark Lord is back. This changes everything. Canon Umbridge walks into a school where Harry Potter in Gryffindor can be dismissed as hysterical, Dumbledore's golden boy chasing glory. Here, she walks into a dungeon where Harry Weasley Potter sits under green and silver banners, sharing a bench with Malfoys and Knots, and still refuses to recant. How do you sell the Ministry's denial when the future Death Eater house is home to the whistleblower? Umbridge's response is not open warfare, it's needles under the skin. In class, she calls on him for every question about dark wizards, then archly wonders whether his personal connections give him special insight. She smiles as she assigns detentions, then etches "I must not tell lies" into his hand, and whispers that Slytherin should know better than to spread panic. She never quite says, "traitor to your house," but every pause, every glance at his tie, does the work. And she weaponizes his house against him. Slytherins who roll their eyes at Harry's talk of Voldemort find themselves prefects, inquisitorial squad prospects, given little privileges. Later curfew, first dibs on Quidditch practice. Those who sit near Harry, who don't laugh when she mocks him, discover their essays graded harshly, their Hogsmeade permissions mysteriously revoked, means he watches his common room become a quiet referendum on his existence. This isn't a story about Slytherin suddenly turning noble en masse. It's about fracture. One faction clusters around Draco, who sees in Umbridge a way to reclaim control of a house Harry has been slowly rebranding. They parrot the prophet, sneer about attention-seeking Weasleys, and tell themselves that siding with the Ministry is safer than being right. Another faction is smaller, quieter, a seventh year who remembers the First War too well, a half-blood who heard their parents whispering after the World Cup, a second year who saw a skull in the sky and can't forget. They don't declare for Harry, they just don't move away when he sits down. But because Hogwarts is a pressure cooker, resistance has to go somewhere. When Hermione suggests a secret defense group, it isn't just a Gryffindor rebellion. It's a question. What if they build something that cuts across the stories the adults are telling? Harry's first recruits are still his old anchors. Ron, Hermione, Ginny. But in this timeline, he also corners a wary Slytherin chaser in an empty classroom and says, "You know he's back. Train with us." Dumbledore's army becomes messier, more dangerous. A Ravenclaw who loves rules shares a practice room with a Slytherin whose father works at the Ministry. A Hufflepuff practices stunning spells next to a boy whose doormates wear silver serpent rings. Every meeting is a risk. Every Patronus lesson a tiny act of treason against Umbridge's version of events and against Slytherin's old reputation. Hogwarts starts to feel less like a school and more like a rehearsal for the war. Harry is no longer just the Gryffindor hero. He's the Slytherin who didn't bend, the proof that ambition can mean protecting people instead of hurting them. Means he's learning to lead in a room where half the faces grew up hearing that his house was the enemy. So, let's explore what happens when that room is betrayed from the inside, and why, in a world where Slytherin is split down the middle, the person who breaks Dumbledore's army might not be who you expect. DA in the shadows, cross-house rebellion, and Slytherin strategy. The first rule of Dumbledore's army in this timeline: you don't say the name out loud. In canon, the DA is a club with a secret. Here, it's a cell with a legend. Harry walks into the Hog's Head with a Slytherin's paranoia already humming under his skin. Because growing up as a Weasley who chose green and silver means he knows exactly how fast gossip moves through a castle built on house rivalries. So the moment that parchment fills with names, he's already breaking them into circles in his head. This isn't a story about a cozy study group. It's a rehearsal for underground resistance. Meetings don't just happen in the room of requirement. They hop. A disused classroom near the greenhouses, a drafty space 3 floors above the kitchens. Once, memorably, an abandoned changing room by the Quidditch pitch, where Ron spends 10 minutes whispering furiously about the smell. Each group only ever knows its own next location. Only 3 people, Harry, Hermione, and Neville, see the full map. The Slytherins in the DA are the fault line and the asset. Blaise Zabini leans against the wall, arms folded, while Hufflepuffs eye him like he's about to hex the ceiling down. Daphne Greengrass quietly corrects Dean on which staircase Filch never uses after curfew. They know prefect patrol patterns, which staff meetings Umbridge never skips, which portraits gossip to which head of house. Their information keeps the DA 1 step ahead. Their presence keeps the room 1 breath away from rupture. Hermione hates the compartmentalization. She doesn't say it that way. She talks about trust, about solidarity, about everyone learning the same spells at the same pace. Harry hears 1 weak link, and Umbridge has a list of 30 names instead of 5. Their arguments become a rhythm. Hermione pushing for open teaching, Harry insisting on need to know. She wants everyone to know who's in Slytherin. He wants plausible deniability. She says, "We're supposed to be different from them." He says, very quietly, "That's why we have to win." So, let's explore what that actually looks like in training. Ambush drills where Gryffindors charge in first, but only because a Slytherin has already slipped round the back to cut off retreat. Misinformation exercises where Harry has them plant 3 different fake rumors about DA meetings and watches who shows up where. Contingency plans for betrayal, rehearsed in a room gone suddenly cold when he says the word. Who do you shield first? Who do you stun? Who do you lie about knowing? Pattern interrupt. This Harry writes scripts for what happens if one of his own sells them out. Means he has them practice being captured. Means he has Ginny and Theo not trade wands and argue cases under Veritaserum. They don't actually have, just to see who can lie with their face while telling the truth with their words. There's a bleak humor in it. Fred and George award points for dramatic death speeches, but because the laughter sits on top of real fear, it doesn't quite land. So is this clandestine, disciplined DA better prepared for the Department of Mysteries? On paper, yes. They know how to move in squads, how to cover exits, how to assume a trap. But it costs them something. The innocence of thinking everyone in the room is simply a friend. The uncomplicated belief that no one here would ever hand them over. And when the prophecy hall shatters around them, the question won't just be, were we ready? It will be, who did we decide to become in order to be ready? The Hall of Prophecy. A different battle at the Department of Mysteries. The Hall of Prophecy doesn't begin with a rescue. It begins with a whisper. Sirius. Tortured. Department of Mysteries. And under it, twined through the vision like smoke, another law. The soft hiss in the back of Harry's mind, insisting that only he, only a Slytherin who understands power and legacy and leverage, can claim what waits on that dusty shelf. The prophecy. His prophecy. Canon Harry rushes out of sheer panic. This Harry pauses, means he stands in the shadow of the common room fire, jaw clenched, running through every angle he's been trained to see. Who benefits if I go? Who set the stage? What if Voldemort wants me in that hall not just as prey, but as witness? Because if Harry hears the full prophecy, the board changes. He knows it's a trap. That's the worst part. This isn't a story about a boy tricked by a single fake vision. It's about a young strategist whose weakest point is still the same: family. Sirius isn't just the cool godfather in leather and bad decisions. In this timeline, he's an honorary Weasley uncle, the one who swore, half drunk on Christmas cheer, that he'd never let Harry face the war alone. So Harry argues with himself. The Slytherin in him whispers, "Stall, inform Dumbledore, use the order." The boy who grew up at the Burrow hears Molly's voice saying, "We protect our own." What if you're wrong and he really is alone down there? That question cuts through every carefully built defense. He doesn't go alone, that's the difference. When he pulls Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna into a disused classroom, he doesn't say, "Who's coming?" He says, "Here's the plan." Code words for retreat and regroup. Pre-agreed fallback points: time room, brain room, exit stairwell, pairs and rotations. Misdirection hexes they've practiced in DA sessions that felt suspiciously more like Auror drills than schoolyard dueling. In the Hall of Prophecy, that preparation matters. When the shelves explode, they don't scatter in blind panic. Ron shouts "red," and everyone dives to the left aisle. Hermione snaps a shatter illusion charm the moment a Death Eater tries to mirror himself. Ginny and Neville run a feint, drawing two masked figures into a crossfire of stunners that would make Moody proud. Luna, serene as ever, calls out enemy positions as if reading off a shopping list. This changes everything about the first clash. No broken ankle for Neville. Harry drilled him on movement until he could weave through curses without thinking. Fewer wild, desperate spells. More shields, more cover fire, more controlled retreats. They even managed to disarm Lucius once, wands switching hands in a moment that would be funny if it weren't so deadly. But because Harry fights like a Slytherin, the Death Eaters adjust. Bellatrix recognizes the patterns. She's seen this playbook in another life, in another war. They start baiting his flanks, feigning weakness to draw his people out of formation. A curse meant for Ginny slams Hermione into a shelf. Glass rains down, and she doesn't get up right away. Ron hesitates between chasing the prophecy orb and dragging Hermione to safety, and that single heartbeat of conflict costs them ground. By the time the order arrives, the students are bloodied but not broken. Fewer shattered bones. More burns. More curse grazes. More psychological scars from realizing the enemy can read their tactics as easily as they read his. And then Sirius falls. The duel on the dais is sharper now, more coordinated. Harry and Sirius moving in tandem, covering each other's blind spots with an ease that comes from shared training and shared stubbornness. They almost have Bellatrix. Almost. One misjudged step, one mocking taunt, one flash of red, and the veil swallows Sirius Black all the same. For a second, the world goes soundless. Harry's mind does the math with brutal clarity. All the planning, all the codes, all the Slytherin caution, and still the universe reached out and took what he loved. Means he doesn't just feel grief, he feels failure. Not as a reckless Gryffindor who charged in, but as a planner who did everything right and still lost. So, let's explore what that does to a boy who now believes that even his best-laid plans can't protect his family from fate. Grief, guilt, and the Slytherin shell. Post-Year 5 Harry. Canon Harry howls. He smashes Dumbledore's things, hurls blame at anyone within reach, lets the rawness of Sirius's death spill out in shouted words and thrown objects. Our Slytherin Harry goes very, very still. The anger is there, but it turns inward, sharp as a blade he points at himself. Because in this timeline, he doesn't just think, I shouldn't have gone. He thinks, I calculated, I chose the risk, I missed something. This isn't a story about a boy punished for reckless courage. It's a story about a strategist who watched his own plan collapse and take his godfather with it. Means he picks apart every choice, every coded message to the Order, every hesitation before looping in Snape, every moment he trusted the wrong clue. So when Dumbledore finally sits him down to explain the prophecy, the reaction shifts. Canon Harry explodes. You should have told me. Slytherin Harry's fury is colder. He listens, jaw clenched, and files away every word as evidence. Dumbledore had the key variable and withheld it. Dumbledore nudged, guided, occluded, until Harry walked straight into Voldemort's trap with half the data. What if Harry had known he was literally the one with the power? Would he have risked Sirius? Or would he have built a different plan entirely? This changes everything about their dynamic going into the final phase of the war. From this point, Harry stops assuming Dumbledore's omissions are benevolent. He starts treating the headmaster as a powerful, necessary ally whose information must be cross-checked, not a benign grandfather figure. He tightens his grip on his own intel, who he's watching in Slytherin, what whispers he's heard from Draco, which rumors about Horcruxes he's piecing together from Snape's evasions and Slughorn's slips. Emotional armor follows strategic armor. Canon Harry leans on Ron and Hermione with clumsy, honest grief. He yells, he cries, he confesses his guilt in a way that drags them into it. Our Slytherin Harry hugs Ron a little longer at the Burrow, lets Ginny hold his hand at the funeral, but when the house is quiet and the others are asleep, he's downstairs alone at the kitchen table, staring at cold tea and replaying the Department of Mysteries frame by frame. He answers, I'm fine. More often, he changes the subject sooner. He lets them think he's coping because the alternative is them trying to help and getting pulled into the blast radius of his choices. There's a dark practicality to it. If people underestimate how broken he is, they also underestimate how far he's willing to go. If Ron thinks Harry is still the slightly impulsive brother who needs reining in, Ron won't see the contingency plans Harry is building in case one of them is imperused. If Hermione believes he's sharing everything, she won't notice the gaps where he's shielding her from the ugliest parts of Snape's memories or Draco's hints about Death Eater meetings. But that Slytherin shell is a double-edged protection. The less he confides, the more his friends become assets to manage, not partners to lean on. The more he trusts only himself, the more he risks repeating the Department of Mysteries on a larger scale. Only this time, the miscalculation could doom the whole war effort. So when the hunt for Horcruxes looms on the horizon, the question isn't just, will Harry tell Ron and Hermione? It's, will this Harry even believe that sharing the burden is safer than outmaneuvering his own family for their own good? And when he finally discovers what Dumbledore has been hiding about the last Horcrux, that question is going to come crashing down on him in a way that makes the Department of Mysteries look almost merciful. The half-blood prince and the half-claimed house. So when Year 6 opens, the real pressure cooker of this timeline isn't Gryffindor Tower at all. It's the Slytherin common room, stone cold and watching. As the war seeps through the walls, enter Horace Slughorn, collecting students the way other people collect rare wines. In canon, he's delighted enough by Harry the Gryffindor. Here, a Slytherin Harry Weasley Potter is the ultimate vintage. Famous, talented, connected to the Weasley family and yet sitting under green and silver banners. Slughorn all but glows. His slug club becomes a little Slytherin salon, with Harry at the center, the proof that his house can still produce heroes, or at least celebrities, if you angle the story correctly. This changes everything about how Harry experiences the Half-Blood Prince's book. In Gryffindor, the scribbled shortcuts feel rebellious, slightly forbidden. In Slytherin, clever workarounds are homework goals. Of course, you use the sharper spell, the faster method, the potion tweak that wins you Slughorn's praise. When your whole house culture says, "Results matter," a spell that slashes open your opponent doesn't read as a red flag. It reads as an option. And because Harry is growing up steeped in that logic, it takes longer for him to ask, at what cost? But because he's also a Weasley, raised on Molly's gentleness and Arthur's quiet ethics, that question never fully goes away. It just simmers under the surface while he racks up effortless exceeds expectations in potions and becomes Slughorn's star pupil, all while Snape watches from the shadows, trying to decide whether to be horrified or impressed. Then there's Draco. In this Slytherin-centric timeline, Harry doesn't observe Draco's mission from across a house divide. He watches a housemate unravel in real time. The boy who once strutted through the common room now sits up late, trembling hands over unfinished essays, flinching when owls arrive from home. Slytherin prides itself on composure, but Draco's is cracking along the seams of family expectation and dark marks. Pattern interrupt. Imagine walking into your dorm at midnight and finding your childhood rival pressing his wand to his own forearm, as if he could scrub something out from under the skin. That's the moment Harry realizes this isn't just about schoolboy cruelty, it's about conscription. So, let's explore those clandestine conversations that follow. Hushed arguments in the corridor outside the prefect's bathroom. Half-whispered threats in the common room when everyone else pretends not to listen. Draco hissing, "You don't understand, they'll kill my mother." And Harry answering, "They'll kill everyone if you help them," without admitting he'd do almost anything to protect his own family too. This isn't a story about easy redemption or instant friendship. It's two terrified 16-year-olds trading half-truths across a chasm they're both trying to bridge without falling. Means he can't go to Dumbledore with everything, because that would expose Draco with everything, because that would expose the Horcrux hunt. So he walks a knife edge instead, using the prince's spells to survive attacks while trying to talk Draco away from murder, all within the same echoing dungeon. By spring, Slytherin House is quietly at war with itself. Some students orbit Slughorn's cozy parties, betting on ministry careers. Others huddle around Draco, drawn to the Malfoy name or the thrill of rebellion. And Harry stands between them, Half-Blood Prince's book in one hand, Draco's secret in the other, realizing that Slytherin has never been more divided or more central to the fate of this entire war-torn timeline. The Tower and the Mark. Slytherin at the lightning strike. By June, the castle feels wrong. Harry comes back from the cave into a Hogwarts where green and silver shadows move ahead of him in the corridors. Slytherins travel in tight clusters or alone, heads down, robes whispering. Some wrists are already inked, hidden under cuffs. Others are bare and shaking because they know what the dark mark means now. Not just power, but a deadline. Choose or be chosen. This isn't a story about a brave Gryffindor stumbling into enemy territory on the Astronomy Tower. This is a Slytherin walking into the heart of his own house's nightmare. He's spent a year watching which seventh years disappear on weekends. He's watched Draco Malfoy go from polished prince to hollow-eyed insomniac, tracing invisible patterns on his arm in the common room firelight. So when he's frozen under the invisibility cloak, Hearing Draco disarm Dumbledore, it doesn't feel shocking. It feels inevitable. What if the boy he once might have called his first friend really has crossed the line? What if all those late-night glimpses, Draco throwing up in the loo, Draco staring at the vanishing cabinet, weren't warnings Harry could fix, but steps on a path no one else saw clearly enough to block? But because Harry is Slytherin here, his plea on the tower is different. He doesn't shout about right and wrong. He talks about options, about deals, about how the Dark Lord never forgives failure, and how disappearing to the continent with your mother is still better than killing a man who just offered you protection. Means he isn't just begging Draco to be good, he's offering him a strategy to survive his own family. And then Snape arrives. Canon Harry sees a murderer. Slytherin Harry sees a man whose entire life is layered in double meanings. The professor who sneered at him in class, then quietly blocked curses aimed at Slytherin students in deserted corridors. The head of house who enforced discipline with one hand and slipped antidotes and alibis with the other. What if the half-blood prince who wrote in the margins of Harry's textbook has been writing in the margins of this war all along? So when Snape casts the killing curse, it tears through Harry on two levels at once. Dumbledore falls, and with him, the one adult who ever spoke openly about redeeming Slytherin. But the way Snape's eyes flicker, the way his jaw locks, the way he refuses to meet Harry's gaze as he flees, means Harry can't file this away as simple betrayal. It's too clean, too staged, too deliberate. Down in the common room, the aftermath is worse than the tower. News spreads before dawn. Someone heard the portrait screaming. Someone saw the dark mark hanging over the castle, that skull and serpent now reflected in green torchlight on every stone. A few students are exultant, whispering that Professor Snape has finally chosen his true side, that Slytherin has struck the first real blow. Others are shattered. One fifth-year girl stares at Snape's empty chair by the fire and whispers, "He was supposed to protect us," until her friends drag her away. The room fractures along invisible lines, marked and unmarked, enthusiastic and horrified. Those whose parents will celebrate this, and those who now have to go home to them. Harry sits in the middle of it, feeling every gaze snag on him and then slide off. The Slytherin who was close to Dumbledore. The boy who wore the prince's handwriting in his bag. The one the rest of the school will now point at and say, "Of course, Slytherin." Because Dumbledore's death won't just crown Voldemort. It will cement the story that Slytherin is the Death Eater house, that green and silver means skull and serpent forever. And Harry can't let that stand. Not when he's seen the first year who cries over care of magical creatures essays, the seventh year who hides Muggle novels in her potions text, the terrified boy asking if refusing the mark will get his sister killed. So, he makes a different vow. He'll hunt Horcruxes, he'll walk into war. But because he is Slytherin, he adds another promise under his breath in that echoing, underwater quiet common room. He will reclaim his house. He will make sure that when this timeline is told as story, Slytherin isn't just a list of dark marks and prison records, but a battleground where some of the bravest choices were made in secret. And that starts now, with the boy in green and silver refusing to let the dark mark define the serpent on his chest. Horcrux hunt, Slytherin style, planning the final campaign. The boy in green and silver grows into the teenager who has to plan a war. When Dumbledore's withered hand reveals the first Horcrux, Slytherin Harry doesn't just flinch. He starts drawing a battle map in his head. Who goes on the board? Who stays off it? In canon, the answer is simple: Ron and Hermione, full stop. But because this Harry has spent 6 years navigating the dungeon's politics, the answer gets messier. He still brings Ron and Hermione, of course he does, This isn't a story about Harry trading family for efficiency. Ron is his anchor to the burrow, and to the version of himself who laughs at kitchen tables. Hermione is the mind that can keep up with his, challenge his worst impulses, and translate Dumbledore's riddles into actual plans. But it also means he quietly recruits from Slytherin, a terrified 6th year whose uncle wears a mask, a 7th year girl who hears things at her parents' dinner parties. Not inner circle comrades, not friends the way Ron and Hermione are. Assets. So, let's explore how that changes the hunt. Information becomes a weapon, not a shared burden. Harry compartmentalizes. Ron knows they're hunting objects that keep Voldemort alive. Hermione knows the word Horcrux and the theory behind it. Only Harry and Dumbledore know the full list of suspected items and the link to Tom Riddle's past. With his Slytherin network, he never says Horcrux at all. He asks for rumors about heirlooms that never die, about cursed treasures that Death Eaters guard more carefully than their children. He sets up dead drops in Hogwarts, a loose stone behind Salazar's statue, a hollow in the roots of the Whomping Willow. He and Hermione devise coded messages charmed to erase themselves if the wrong wand touches them. There's a contingency plan in case he's captured that Ron hates. If Harry disappears, a sealed letter in Snape's desk will trigger a chain of owls and a Gringotts vault key. Means he is planning for his own failure, and that's a Slytherin calculation Gryffindor Harry never let himself make. His understanding of Voldemort's Slytherin mindset sharpens the search. He doesn't just follow Dumbledore's memories. He thinks, where would Tom Riddle hide the pieces of his soul to impress himself? The Chamber of Secrets. A black family relic in a house full of dark artifacts. A trophy buried in the bones of some forgotten gaunt shack. He predicts protections that aren't just deadly, but theatrical, designed to humiliate intruders. And knowing that, really knowing the vanity and self-loathing behind it, eats at him, because he sees how close he could have been to that same hunger for control. The clashes with his friends start small and then cut deep. When a captured Snatcher refuses to talk, Harry proposes legilimency. Hermione goes pale. "That's a violation, Harry." He answers, "So is murder." When one of his Slytherin contacts is threatened, Ron snaps that they can't risk the whole mission for someone who won't even stand with us in public. Harry's instinct is to trade, to bargain, to use a Death Eater cousin as leverage. Hermione refuses. "We do not take hostages." Pattern interrupt. What if he almost does? There's a night where Harry has a bound Death Eater in front of him, and a Horcrux location on the line. The Slytherin in him can see the path. Crucio threaten their children, get the answer, end the war faster. The Weasley in him hears Molly's voice. He chooses restraint that time. But because he hesitates, the Death Eater escapes, and someone else dies in the next attack. This changes everything. The war's turning points begin to hinge on that knife edge. Ruthless efficiency that might save dozens, or stubborn compassion that might save his soul. Each Horcrux becomes not just a puzzle box, but a moral test, and the boy who chose Slytherin has to decide over and over what kind of serpent he's going to be. And the closer he gets to the last piece, the more dangerous those choices become. For him, for his friends, and for the fragile, hard-won future he's trying to protect. War comes to Hogwarts, Slytherin's civil war. And while Harry is out there hunting Horcruxes and arguing with the echo of a dead headmaster in his head, Hogwarts is changing under his feet. When war comes to the castle in this timeline, it doesn't arrive with a bang. It seeps in, new rules on the notice board, new punishments whispered about in corridors. And then, one September, the Carrows at the staff table and Severus Snape in the headmaster's chair. Canon gave us that image from the outside. What if we watched it from the Slytherin table, with Harry's empty seat in the middle? Slytherin House, on paper, wins. No detentions for snide blood status comments, extra privileges, detention rotations that just happen to skip green and silver. But because we've watched Harry growing up in that dungeon, we know the cost. First years flinch when Electo smiles. Older students trade homework answers for not being volunteered to demonstrate the Cruciatus. The common room is warmer, richer, safer, and haunted by the sounds coming through the stone from the dungeons below. This isn't a story about a unified snake pit cackling in the dark. The house fractures. There are the true believers, parroting their parents' politics with an extra edge because they can finally say out loud what they heard at elegant, terrifying dinner parties. There are the quiet rebels, the ones Harry used to study with, who remember the boy who fought the basilisk under their banner and think, very privately, that maybe Slytherin can mean something else. And there's the largest group of all, the survivalists who keep their heads down, laugh at the right jokes, and tell themselves that neutrality is safety. Harry's legacy becomes dangerous in that mix. The official story is simple. Potter the traitor, Potter the half-blood puppet of Dumbledore. But in the Slytherin dorms, that doesn't quite stick, because they remember the second year who went down into the chamber when everyone assumed the heir was one of them. They remember the fourth year who faced a dragon and then spent his victory sneaking other students out from under Umbridge's quill. They remember the fifth-year Slytherin prefect who argued with Snape about torture as detention and walked out of a staff meeting shaking. Means he becomes a myth inside a house that isn't allowed to say his name with respect. First years whisper about our Harry the way other houses talk about the founders. So, let's explore what that turns into. Resistance in Slytherin doesn't look like DA meetings in the room of requirement. It looks like forged attendance sheets, so Muggleborns technically weren't in that class. It looks like a seventh-year pure blood quietly altering Filch's records so the same Hufflepuff isn't punished 3 nights in a row. It looks almost boring. Smuggled bread rolls and bruise paste passed under library tables, passwords slipped to DA remnants through cousins in other houses. Snape knows some of it. He has to. But because this is Slytherin, he grades on intent and dieability. As long as the Carrows can't prove who's doing what, he lets the numbers blur. By the time Harry finally walks back into Hogwarts, Slytherin isn't a monolith. It's a civil war in green and silver, and the quickest way to tell which side someone's on is very simple. When they say Harry Potter's name, do they spit it, or do they lower their voice, as if they're afraid the walls are listening, and secretly hope that he is? Collective courage. A different DA, a different final stand. So when Harry finally does walk back into Hogwarts, he isn't stepping into the same castle he left. He's stepping into a pressure cooker that Neville, Ginny, and Luna have been holding together, with spit, spellwork, and sheer stubbornness. Because in this timeline, the DA never died. It mutated. What if the most dangerous club at Hogwarts stopped being a Gryffindor rebellion with guests and became a genuinely cross-house resistance? Down in the room of requirement, the cushions are the same. The practice dummies are the same. But there's a knot of Slytherins at the back now, wands out, eyes sharp, wearing expressions that say, very clearly, we're not here to make friends, we're here to win. Neville leads drills with a quiet authority that would have stunned his first-year self. Ginny prowls the perimeter, correcting stances, snapping at anyone who slacks. Luna just appears next to people who are about to break and says something so strange and kind that they don't. This isn't a story about a ragtag band of plucky kids punching up. This is occupied territory, and these are insurgents. And the Slytherins, they change everything. They are the ones who know which portraits are loyal to Snape and which to the Carrows. They can map staff habits down to the minute. When Alecto takes her smoke break, when Amicus dozes in the staff room, which prefects can be baited into chasing a decoy while someone else sabotages the chains on the punishment cuffs. They know secret passages that even the twins never found, because some of them were passed down in pure-blood families as carefully as heirlooms. One quiet sixth year explains, in a flat voice, exactly how Death Eaters think when they enter a room, where they stand, who they hex first. It's not theory to her, it's dinner table conversation. But because this is Slytherin and Gryffindor and everyone in between crammed into one underground army, the room of requirement echoes with more than spells. It echoes with arguments. Some Gryffindors refuse to train back-to-back with Slytherins who wore inquisitorial squad badges 2 years ago. Some Slytherins bristle when Neville Longbottom, pure blood but not the right kind, gives orders, or when Ginny Weasley, blood traitor, tells them to fall in. Harry's absence hangs over every raised voice. Someone always ends up saying it. Potter wouldn't have done it this way. The turning point comes on a freezing night in March. Snape is scheduled to host a discipline review with a group of first years who've been passing notes about Harry. The DA decides that meeting is not going to happen. The plan is brutal in its simplicity. Intercept the first years, trigger a false fire alarm in the dungeons, and trap the Carrows behind a warded corridor long enough for the kids to vanish into a hidden classroom. It only works if everyone trusts everyone. Neville and a Slytherin beater turned saboteur crawl through a forgotten ventilation shaft to lay the wards. Ginny and a boy whose father wears a skull mask run interference in the corridors, staging an argument so loud and vicious that Filch and his cat follow them instead of the first years. Luna and a Muggle-born Slytherin quietly shepherd terrified 11-year-olds through a tapestry most of them have never noticed. There's a moment when it nearly falls apart. A prefect in Green Corners, Ginny, hisses a threat about her family, and for one breath she thinks the whole thing's blown. Then the Slytherin boy at her side turns, hexes his own prefect, and says very calmly, "We don't have time for this." That's the night the DA stops being us and them and becomes only us. By the time he appears in the Great Hall, he isn't a lone savior descending from legend. He's the missing piece in a resistance that has already learned, through blood and bruises, that house lines are a luxury they can't afford. Means he doesn't just reconnect Gryffindor courage to Slytherin cunning. He embodies the fact that Hogwarts itself has chosen to stand together. And when the final battle begins, the question won't be who follows Harry Potter. It will be who dares stand against a castle that has finally remembered it is one house under siege and utterly done with being afraid. The Battle of Hogwarts. When green banners don't fall, and when the battle finally breaks, the castle answers. Stone shudders. Shields slam into place. And in the dungeons, in a house everyone assumes has already chosen a side, something far quieter and far more dangerous happens. McGonagall offers the houses a choice. In canon, Slytherin files out in a single damning line. In this timeline, the green and silver ranks fracture. Some go without hesitation, faces pale, jaws set because their parents are out there and they can't imagine dueling their own family. Some stay openly, wands already drawn, arguing with a prefect who is desperately trying to keep order. And some, the ones who understand that survival is a long game, not a long, promise to evacuate and then slip sideways into the shadows instead. This isn't a story about Slytherin magically becoming Gryffindor with better tailoring. It's about what happens when ambition and cunning refuse to belong to Voldemort. when Harry, who has been growing up in that dungeon for 7 years, refuses to let his house be written off as enemy territory. So, let's explore how that looks in the chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts. On the 7th floor corridor, a masked Death Eater raises his wand to call for reinforcements, and his protean-linked coin burns his palm. The message he's trying to send reroutes, garbles, collapses into nonsense, because a quiet 50-year Slytherin, brilliant at arithmancy and sick of being called future Death Eater, has already hexed the network in the Room of Requirement. Sabotaging communications isn't glorious. There's no cheering crowd, but because those messages fail, 3 giants never reach the courtyard. In the Great Hall, where younger students huddle under tables, a tall Slytherin girl Harry's tutored for years is running a different operation. She's organizing the first and second years into tight clusters, layering shields the way Snape taught them, overlapping, precise, efficient. They're using dark defense spells that were never in Flitwick's curriculum, ugly but effective magic that turns killing curses aside by devouring their momentum. It looks wrong. It saves lives. Pattern interrupt. Picture Neville, sprinting past a column, doing a double take as he sees a Slytherin 6th year calmly counter-hexing a Death Eater's Cruciatus, with a spell that leaves the attacker screaming instead. For a second, Neville hesitates. Then he nods, just once. They fight back to back without another word. Harry's night becomes a series of those wordless, loaded moments. A shared look with the boy who once sneered blood traitor at Ron, now standing guard over Ginny as she herds wounded towards the stairs. A snapped, "You with me?" to a girl who used to mock Hermione's teeth, and her dry, "Try to keep up, Weasley," before they both blast a path through a knot of snatchers. Means he isn't just leading Gryffindor, he's cashing in 7 years of corridor bargains and late-night arguments in the common room. Outside, under the shattered astronomy tower, the sight of Slytherin's dueling Death Eaters does something Voldemort never planned for. His followers falter when green-robed teenagers aim hexes at their masks. The Order stares, thrown off balance. For a heartbeat, the whole battlefield stutters as everyone tries to rewrite the story in their heads. If Slytherin isn't his, then what is he really offering? This changes everything, because Slytherin's knowledge of dark spells, honed in whispers and half-forbidden textbooks, is now being used to shield retreating Hufflepuffs, to booby-trap corridors, to pull wounded Ravenclaws out of cursed fire. The house, that was supposed to be his breeding ground, becomes the crack in his narrative. And when the dust finally settles, the Great Hall tells the truth. Green and silver scarves lie among the fallen on both sides, wrapped around Death Eaters' throats, clutched in the hands of students who died defending the castle. Slytherin banners hang scorched, but still there, refusing to fall neatly into hero or villain. Slytherin was never just one thing, and now, in a world where Harry chose their table on his first night, no one will ever again be able to pretend that it was. The forest and the serpent, Harry's sacrifice reframed. The forest has never been neutral ground. In this timeline, when Harry Weasley Slytherin steps between the trees, the war doesn't just follow him. It holds its breath. Canon gives us a boy walking to his death because he believes his life is expendable. Here, that walk is something sharper. What if the child who grew up in a house of red and gold, but wore green and silver at school, turned that march into the clearest calculation he's ever made? This isn't a story about blind martyrdom. It's about a Slytherin who has finally decided exactly what his life is worth and how best to spend it. By this point, he has done his homework. Years of trawling through Slytherin lore, reading Tom Riddle's old essays under Snape's watchful eye, arguing late into the night with Draco about blood purity and fear. He understands In a way canon Harry never fully articulates, that Voldemort is not just cruel, he is terrified of endings, of limits, of being ordinary dust. That fear is the engine behind every Horcrux, every murder. So when Harry pieces together that he is carrying a fragment of that terror in his own chest, he doesn't just accept it with Gryffindor fatalism, he weighs it. He tests the logic. If the part of Voldemort inside him dies when his body does, then walking into the forest unarmed becomes the most efficient move on the board. Means he can end the war in one strike if he can make himself walk. The goodbyes, therefore, are quieter. He doesn't stop to explain the entire plan to Ron and Hermione because he trusts that the two people who have watched him juggle Slytherin politics and Weasley chaos for 7 years will see the shape of it. A longer hug with Ron, a steady look with Hermione, a murmured, "Trust me, finish it." No grand speeches, no dramatic reveals, just a boy who grew up in a big noisy family slipping away before anyone can make him stay. In the clearing, the atmosphere is different too. The Death Eaters don't just see the boy who lived, they see the Slytherin who refused them, the student who argued back in their children's common room, who protected Muggle-borns under the same serpent banner they once used to terrorize the school. His defiance isn't a betrayal of his house, it's a verdict on what they did to it. Voldemort, facing a Slytherin Harry, cannot dismiss this as Gryffindor foolishness. He has to reckon with the fact that his supposed heir has chosen self-sacrifice as the ultimate act of cunning. That the boy who could have been his perfect successor is instead using Slytherin traits: resourcefulness, long-term thinking, ruthless clarity to dismantle him. When the curse hits, it doesn't just shatter a Horcrux. It snaps the last thread tying Voldemort's legacy to Salazar's house. This changes everything for Slytherin in the years to come. Because after this night, no one can claim that darkness there was inevitable. But what does a house do when its old master dies and one of its own walks back from the dead to claim it? So, let's explore what happens when Harry returns. After the wand falls, Slytherin's reckoning and renewal, Harry returns to a world that wants someone to blame. The castle stones are barely cool, the dust of the collapsed walls still hanging in the air, when the whispers start. What if the problem was never just Voldemort? What if the rot was Slytherin itself? In the stunned hours after the battle, that question hardens into a policy instinct. Dismantle the snake's nest. At the ministry, tired officials and triumphant war heroes sit around scorched tables and talk about structural safeguards. It sounds reasonable. It means proposals to dissolve Slytherin House entirely or turn it into a probationary program under Auror oversight. Parents write furious letters demanding their children be moved. The prophet runs op-eds calling Slytherin a breeding ground, as if the house itself cast the dark mark. This isn't a story about a few hot-headed bigots yelling in the street. It's the quieter, more dangerous consensus that maybe it's safer if Slytherin never has power again. Because canon gave them Voldemort, the Lestranges, Malfoy's Carrows. The public memory doesn't linger on the ones who stayed neutral, much less the ones who turned. That's where Harry walks in. He stands in a packed ministry atrium under the same golden ceiling that once hosted Fudge's smear campaign, and testifies, not about his own scars, about his house. He names Theodore Nott, who hexed his own father to stop him reaching the Room of Requirement, Daphne Greengrass, who smuggled first years through secret passages when the Carrows prowled the corridors, Millicent Bulstrode, who dragged a bleeding Hufflepuff behind a fallen tapestry and refused to leave him. He says "we" when he talks about Slytherin casualties. He refuses to let the boy who lived be used to bury the house that sheltered him, means he looks Kingsley, McGonagall, the Wizengamot in the eye and says, very calmly, that if they brand every snake a Death Eater, they're finishing Voldemort's work for him. Inside the dungeons, the debate is uglier, more intimate. Some Slytherins want a full rebrand. New colors, new founder emphasized. Anything to stop flinching when they see their crest. Others, mostly old families, want to double down. If the world will hate them no matter what, why bend? Then there's the third camp, the one Harry slowly gathers around himself. Keep the ambition, change the aim. What if cunning isn't about domination, but about rebuilding faster than anyone else? Pansy Parkinson, of all people, suggests a mentorship program where Slytherin prefects are assigned first years from other houses, responsible for their safety in duels and on Hogsmeade weekends. It starts as a PR move. It doesn't stay that way. New traditions grow in the cracks. A Slytherin-only study night that becomes open to anyone who can solve the riddle on the door. A yearly Oath of the Serpent, where older students swear, in front of the school, to use their influence to protect those with less. The house table gains a narrow strip of silver, engraved with the names of Slytherins who died fighting Voldemort, right where everyone can see. This changes everything, because the next generation doesn't grow up only hearing that Slytherin means evil. They see portraits of Andromeda Tonks and a newly commissioned painting of a tired, war-worn Snape hanging in the common room, framed not as monsters or martyrs, but as complicated examples. In the end, the real victory isn't that Voldemort falls, it's that Slytherin doesn't fall with him. The house survives him, outgrows him, and, slowly, stubbornly, stops belonging to him at all. But what does it cost Harry to be the face of that transformation? To stand between his house and a world that still fears snakes? In the next section, we follow the toll that choice takes on him, and the unexpected alliances it forges. Zooming out one last time, what Slytherin? Harry reveals about canon. So, when we zoom out from the battles and the politics and the House Cup tallies, what does this green and silver timeline actually show us about the canon story we started from? What if Slytherin, Harry isn't just a fun reversal, but a mirror held up to Gryffindor Harry? On the surface, this Harry grows into a very different hero. He is strategic where canon Harry is impulsive, more suspicious of easy answers, more fluent in politics because he has to survive in a common room where last names are weapons. He trades the broom first think later instinct for careful leverage and contingency plans. But because the core wound is the same, a boy who watched his parents die for a cause he barely understands, he's still defined by one stubborn refusal. He will not let hatred make his choices for him. Not for Draco. Not for Snape. Not even for Voldemort. This isn't a story about proving Slytherin was secretly the best house all along. It's about exposing how arbitrary those house lines really are. The Sorting Hat tells us Harry would do well in Slytherin. In canon, one frightened 11-year-old's not Slytherin is enough to redirect the entire war. This changes everything when we let him say the opposite. It forces us to ask, what are we doing? Sorting children into moral categories before they've even unpacked. What does it mean that the adults then treat those colors as destiny? Putting Harry in Slytherin also shines a harsher light on Dumbledore's plans. In the original timeline, he leans hard on Gryffindor symbolism. The sword, the House of Godric, the boy who lived framed as a lion-hearted martyr. With a Slytherin Harry, that scaffolding doesn't hold. Means he can't be the effortless icon Dumbledore keeps on the chessboard. Means Dumbledore has to confront his own distrust of snakes much earlier, or risk losing Harry to other mentors who speak Harry's new language of ambition and caution. And under all of this, The same moral keeps pulsing. Love and choice, not house colors, decide who becomes a monster and who becomes a martyr. Tom Riddle was a Slytherin orphan who chose power over connection. Harry is a Slytherin orphan who chooses connection even when it terrifies him. Same house, same talents, different answers to who do I protect. So, let's explore what that does to everyone around him. Because once Harry is the Slytherin who shields first years from Carrow curses, who drags Draco away from the edge instead of shoving him over it, you can't look at canon Slytherins the same way. You start to see Pansy as a scared teenager, not a punchline. You start to wonder who Blaise Zabini might have been, under a head boy who wasn't Tom Riddle, but Harry Potter in green. The next time you reread canon and watch the snakes slink off during the Battle of Hogwarts, you may catch yourself asking, in this other story, how many of them would have stayed? In the next section, we'll test that question against specific canon scenes and ask where Slytherin, Harry's presence would most radically rewrite who lives, who dies, and who walks away changed. From page to screen to what if, why this AU hits so hard. And this is where the Slytherin Harry thought experiment stops being a clever twist and starts hitting uncomfortably close to home. Because under the green and silver aesthetic, this what if is really asking, what happens when one word at 11 years old brands you forever? Many fans latch onto, what if Harry chose Slytherin? Almost instinctively. The sorting hat scene is one of the few places in canon where we watch a child negotiate his own label in real time. Not Slytherin, not Slytherin. And the hat relents. This changes everything. It taps into that universal fear that a school, a neighborhood, a last name, one early decision means you're filed under good or bad for the rest of your life. Who hasn't wondered what might have happened if a single form, a single classroom, a single first impression had gone differently? Through Slytherin, Harry, the evil house, turns into something messier and more human. This isn't a story about redeeming every snake with a hug and a speech. It's about the catharsis of watching a stigmatized group slowly reclaim its story because someone we already love and trust is living inside it. When Harry Potter sits down beside Draco Malfoy instead of across from him, when he shares a dorm with boys whose fathers wear Death Eater masks, the audience is forced to see the cracks. The pressured heir, the scared kid parroting his parents, the ambitious girl who just wants to survive a war she didn't start. That hits hard because it mirrors real life. Maybe you grew up in a family with a reputation in your town. Maybe your accent, your postcode, your religion, or your race meant teachers assumed they knew your story before you opened your mouth. Slytherin, Harry, is the boy who walks into the room and feels everyone's eyes say, oh, one of them, means he has to work twice as hard to prove basic decency while still carrying pride in where he comes from. That tension, refusing shame without denying the harm some people from your community have done, is work many viewers recognize in their own lives. And this AU is bittersweet. It offers Harry new tools, political awareness from day one, fluency in Slytherin power games, a front-row seat to how Voldemort seduces frightened children. But because he's in the dungeons, he also collects new scars. Different friendships fracture. Different teachers fail him. He might save a few Slytherins from the dark mark and lose a few Gryffindors who never quite trust him. There is no timeline where Harry's life is painless. There are only different configurations of grief and grace. Crucially, this doesn't replace canon. It deepens our appreciation for it. The fact that you can move Harry into the house most associated with Voldemort, surround him with Malfoys instead of Weasleys, and he still feels recognizably himself, tells us how robust these characters are. So, Let's explore specific scenes next, not to prove that Slytherin was better, but to test how far we can bend the story before it breaks, and what that reveals about the boy at its center. If you were in the hat, inviting the viewer into the dungeon. But before we follow Harry into any more reimagined scenes, pause the camera for a second and put yourself on that stool instead. 11 years old, the whole hall watching. The hat slipping down over your eyes and whispering in your ear. What if, in that moment, you didn't just ask, "Where do I belong?" but "What will this choice turn me into?" The hat rustles through your head. It sees the parts you're proud of and the parts you'd rather keep buried. Maybe it murmurs, "Plenty of courage. There's Gryffindor." Maybe it hums over your curiosity and says, "Ravenclaw would help you grow." Maybe it feels the way you cling to people, the way you'd do anything to protect your family, and Hufflepuff glows warm. And then, almost as an afterthought, it finds that cold, clear thread of ambition, that voice that says, "I want to matter," and it whispers, "Ah, Slytherin." What do you say back? This isn't a story about quizzes on the internet or which scarf you own. It's about that inner flinch when a house name is spoken. If the hat offered you a genuine choice, would you lean into the house that flatters who you already think you are, or the one that scares you because it might change you? This changes everything, because in this timeline we've watched Harry do exactly that with Slytherin. Now twist it one step further. Imagine the hat shouts the house you least wanted, the one with the worst reputation in your year. You walk to that table under a storm of whispers. Your friends-to-be are suddenly across the room in red or yellow or blue. For the next 7 years, every teacher, every parent, every headline folds you into a story you didn't write. Do you bend to it? Or spend the rest of your schooling quietly, stubbornly refusing it? Picture being the muggle-born who ends up in Slytherin, or the anxious kid in Gryffindor who hates flying but is expected to be fearless. Or you, with your real-world history, sitting down among green and silver banners while people wait for you to fail. What would it take, day after day, not to give them the satisfaction? Because you do have Slytherin traits. Ambition, resourcefulness, self-preservation. Maybe you don't call them that. Maybe you call them having a 5-year plan, finding a workaround, knowing when to leave a toxic group chat. In the real world, those things can protect you and the people you love. The question is, at whose expense? So, let's explore you for a moment instead of Harry. When you angle for the promotion, when you keep the useful secret, when you decide which battles are worth your energy, what story are you telling about yourself? Are you using those Slytherin tools to carve out safety for many, or just comfort for one? The most interesting question isn't, would you be a Slytherin? It's, what would you do if the world decided you were one and expected the worst? If your classmates, your boss, your family already believed you were the ambitious, untrustworthy one, would you soften yourself to prove them wrong? Or sharpen yourself because resistance feels pointless? Pattern interrupt. Imagine a future Daily Prophet headline with your name on it. No magic, just metaphor. Ambitious upstart disrupts tradition. Cunning strategist saves department. Same traits, different framing. Which version are you quietly steering toward when no one's watching? Because this isn't just a Hogwarts thought experiment. Prejudice, reputation, the boxes people put you in, those are painfully real. Our Slytherin Harry AU only matters if it sends you back to your own timeline asking, who do I let define me? And who do I choose to protect, even when the hat on my head says I shouldn't? Hold that question, because in the next section we're going to drop it into specific scenes. Stone corridors, Quidditch pitches, detentions with Snape, and watch what you, not just Harry, might do there. Loose threads and alternate paths. Other dominoes we didn't follow. So before we march Harry down those stone corridors with you, we need to pause and admit something. We're only following a handful of dominoes. This isn't a story about mapping every single crack in the timeline. It can't be. Because the moment Harry sits at the Slytherin table, 100 background characters quietly start living different lives. What happens to Pansy Parkinson when the boy she's been told is dangerous, arrogant Gryffindor royalty is instead a quiet, watchful presence at her own table? Does she double down on cruelty? Or does she discover that snide comments bounce off someone who's seen worse than schoolyard politics? Blaise Zabini, who in canon drifts through Hogwarts as a self-contained mystery, suddenly has a front-row seat to the boy who lived, refusing to play anyone's mascot. Does that make him more cynical? Or secretly impressed? And Theodore Nott, the quiet strategist in the back row, what if he's the first one to realize Harry is trying to protect Slytherin from the inside, and quietly starts helping? Outside the dungeons, the ripples get stranger. McGonagall still watches him. Of course she does. But because he's in green, her mentorship has to happen in Transfiguration classrooms after everyone else has left, in raised eyebrows instead of house points, in the way she chooses to believe him when other teachers don't. Means she becomes the stern aunt who can't clap for him at the Slytherin table, but absolutely can corner Snape in the staff room and say, "Severus, I know what you're doing. Don't you dare waste Lily's son." Lupin's year changes too. Teaching a Slytherin Harry means lesson plans that anticipate Malfoy's taunts, and Snape's sabotage means chocolate pressed into Harry's hand in the corridor with a low, "You're not your house, you know." Does Lupin sit at the Slytherin table once, just once during a feast, and watch the whole hall stop breathing? And the Weasleys? How do you reconcile loving him in green? Ron's jealousy hits different when his best friend is in the house his family mistrusts, but still comes home for Christmas, and steals his jumpers. Molly has to learn that protecting Harry now includes sending him back to a common room she doesn't fully understand. Fred and George, they absolutely test whether Slytherin's password can be guessed with enough puns. Zoom out further, and the politics twist. A Slytherin boy who lived means the French ministry eyeing him as proof that dark English houses can be rehabilitated. Durmstrang's headmaster wonders if recruiting him would be a diplomatic coup. Other ministries start asking, if the symbol of Voldemort's defeat wears green and silver, what does that do to pure-blood parties at home? This changes everything about post-war alliances, because Harry's very existence in Slytherin muddies every easy narrative. And then there are the smaller canon beats we're barely touching. How does the Time Turner year play out when a Slytherin Harry and a Gryffindor Hermione are sneaking through two different sets of corridors? What does the Quidditch World Cup feel like when Harry is watching the Irish and Bulgarian teams while sitting between Draco and Ron, both pretending they're not enjoying the same match? When Snatchers stalk the countryside later, do they hesitate for a heartbeat when they recognize Slytherin's former seeker, standing with a Muggleborn and a blood traitor? We're not going to answer all of that here. We can't, and honestly we shouldn't. So let's explore the big threads and leave these loose ones dangling on purpose, as invitations. What if Pansy made a different choice? What if Blaise switched sides earlier? What if one awkward Weasley dinner in third year changed ministry policy 5 years later? In the next section, we're going to narrow the frame again, drop back into those specific scenes we promised. Detentions, Quidditch practice, late-night strategy sessions, and let you watch how a few of those unanswered questions start to echo at the edges of Harry's story. Why Slytherin needed Harry, and Harry needed Slytherin. So, Let's explore what happens when we finally stop treating Slytherin as a narrative punchline and start treating it as Harry's missing education. Because if Harry grows up a Weasley and then chooses Slytherin, he walks into that dungeon with something canon Harry never really gets until it's almost too late: a crash course in how power actually works. He can't just win by flying well and trusting that McGonagall will quietly fix the paperwork. He has to learn why Draco's name opens doors, why Snape's silences are strategic, why a raised eyebrow at the Slytherin table can be more dangerous than a shouted insult in the Gryffindor common room. Slytherin gives him language, not parseltongue, politics. Means he learns to count votes in the Wizengamot, the way he counts bludgers on the pitch. Means he hears his enemies boasting in the dorm after meetings at Malfoy Manor and files it away, understanding patterns, not just faces. This changes everything when the chamber opens, or when Fudge starts denying Voldemort's return. Harry doesn't just rage, he anticipates. He knows who will fold, who will posture, who is terrified of losing their seat. But because he's still a Weasley at his core, Harry brings something into Slytherin that House hasn't seen in decades: ambition that isn't rooted in fear. He wants to win, yes. He wants to protect his family, to survive, to outmaneuver Voldemort. Yet he also wants Blaise to have a future that isn't stamped Death Eater at 11. He wants the first year who flinches at the dark mark jokes to know that being cunning doesn't mean being cruel. This isn't a story about Harry being corrupted by green and silver. It's a story about Slytherin being forced to confront what its own ideals look like when they're untangled from Voldemort's shadow. Harry is ambitious for peace. He is ruthless about mercy. He will absolutely blackmail a bigoted prefect into backing off a Muggle-born classmate, and then help that prefect with potions homework, because he refuses to waste potential on stupidity. That makes him dangerous in a new way. Not just to Death Eaters, but to the comforting binaries Hogwarts runs on: brave versus cunning, poor versus privileged, oppressed versus oppressor. Slytherin. Harry speaks both languages. He knows what it is to be the charity case in second-hand robes, and he knows what it is to sit beside Draco while a professor automatically believes their version of events. When he argues for house unity, he's not making a speech, he's translating. Pattern interrupt. Imagine McGonagall watching Harry calmly negotiate a ceasefire between Slytherin and Hufflepuff over Quidditch practice slots. She's expecting a duel. He brings a contract. In a war that's fundamentally about blood and belonging, reconciliation needs bridge figures, people who can walk into a Slytherin common room and a Weasley kitchen and not feel like a traitor in either space. Harry becomes that, not by abandoning Slytherin, but by insisting it live up to its best self. In that sense, this AU isn't really about changing Harry. It's about giving Slytherin the chance to be what it always could have been if someone brave enough and loved enough had chosen it on purpose. In the next section, we're going to drop back into those concrete scenes we promised and watch this play out. One detention, one Quidditch practice, one late-night strategy session at a time. Back to the stool, the one word that changes everything. But before we follow him through every detention and Quidditch practice, we have to go back. Back to the stool. Back to the hat slipping over an 11-year-old's eyes and whispering in the dark. In canon, the scene is burned into our brains. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes. And a thirst to prove yourself. Better be Gryffindor. And in the middle of that, Harry's desperate repetitive thought. Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin. That one refusal is the hinge of the original story. But because this is a different timeline, Listen to the same moment with one word turned. The hat murmurs, "You could be great, you know, in Slytherin." And Harry, thinking of a pale boy on the train and of Ron's wrinkled nose, doesn't beg, "Not Slytherin." He swallows, heart pounding, and whispers, "All right." Or even softer, "Slytherin." This changes everything. On paper, the divergence is microscopic. One syllable. One breath. Externally, nothing else shifts. Same stool, same hall, same scar catching the candlelight. But the consequences radiate outward in rings. Means he walks past the roaring Gryffindor table and sits down beside Draco Malfoy. Means Ron's first night at Hogwarts is watching the boy he'd already started to think of as a friend disappear into the house his brothers warned him about. Means Hermione Granger, who has just memorized Hogwarts, a history, is suddenly revising every assumption she's ever read about Slytherin, while she sharpens her quill. This isn't a story about a perfect fix or a secret better universe hidden behind Door B. In Gryffindor, Harry gains a ready-made family in the common room, but he also absorbs a script that bravery means self-destruction, that charging in first is the only way to be worthy of love. In Slytherin, he gains access and influence and a chance to protect people from the inside. But he also learns suspicion early, and he loses the easy, unthinking warmth of sharing a dorm with Ron. Either way, someone ends up on the far side of the hall. Both choices contain loss. Both contain possibility. There is no version where everyone lives, where no friendships fracture, where no child goes back to their dormitory feeling they chose wrong. What changes is which wounds scar over and which gifts arrive instead. A Slytherin Harry might save more Slytherins from Voldemort's orbit. A Gryffindor Harry might save more Muggle-borns by inspiring open resistance. Different costs, different kinds of growing up. Rowling comes back to this idea again and again. Our choices, more than our abilities or our housecarves, show who we are. But the hat scene also exposes the other truth we sometimes skip. Context matters. The adults who spoke over Harry on the train, the stories he heard in a single afternoon, shaped which choices even felt possible in that moment. Change the stories, and you change which word he can imagine saying. So, let's explore one more question. Where are your sorting hat moments hiding? The job you took because it was safe? The friend group you sat down with on that first terrifying day? The one time you said, "all right," instead of "not that"? And you're still living with the aftershocks. In the next section, we're going to stay with Harry under that hat and watch the ripples move outward, decision by decision, until the whole castle feels different. What this AU teaches us about power, prejudice, and second chances. So when Harry breathes, "All right, Slytherin," this isn't just a boy picking a table. This is a whole system being forced to look in a mirror. Because Slytherin, Harry makes something very clear, very fast. Collective blame is lazy. In canon, most of the castle treats green and silver as a crime scene tape. Death Eaters came from there. So everyone in that house must be dangerous, untrustworthy, already halfway to Azkaban. But because the boy who lived is sitting under those dripping dungeon ceilings, the logic cracks. Are you really going to say Harry Potter is evil now? Or admit the story you've been telling about an entire house was always too simple? This isn't a story about what if Harry turned dark. It's a story about what happens when a visibly decent, stubbornly moral kid lives inside the group everyone else has agreed to fear. Representation suddenly isn't abstract. It's Harry rolling his eyes at Draco's blood prejudice. Harry helping a Muggle-born Slytherin with potions. Harry walking into the Great Hall in green robes and still throwing himself between a troll and the people he loves. means he becomes a walking counterexample, means every time a younger Snake hears, "all Slytherins go bad," they can answer, "tell that to Potter." And that changes everything for the people around him too. Draco's sneering bravado hits different when the most famous wizard of his generation keeps choosing him as a project worth arguing with, instead of a rival to ignore. Snape's loyalty to Lily plays out in the open, because now his house's star student is also the boy he's sworn to protect. The Slytherin common room stops being just a villain factory and becomes a battlefield for what ambition is allowed to mean. Underneath that, this AU keeps circling one quiet theme: second chances. Draco gets a second chance to decide who he is when his first friend in Hogwarts is a Slytherin Harry who will absolutely hex him for using slurs and then share his chocolate frogs afterward. Snape gets a second chance to mentor a Potter without repeating every petty cruelty from canon, because their shared house forces daily contact, not just snarled comments across a classroom. Even Slytherin House itself gets a second chance, not through speeches, but through years of watching their most famous member refuse to become what the world expects. And Hogwarts? Hogwarts is just a school that reflects a much bigger pattern. We see this in our own world all the time. Track kids, gifted programs, good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods, schools that whisper about certain surnames before a child even walks through the door. Once a system sticks a label on you at 11, how often does anyone come back to ask if it was right? Pattern interrupt. Imagine a ministry hearing years after the war, where Slytherin veterans testify that the reason they defected from Voldemort was Harry Potter, housemate, not chosen one, not Gryffindor hero, just the boy who shared their dorm and kept insisting they could be better. That's the quiet power of this timeline. We can't rewrite canon. Harry still ends up under the hat saying "not Slytherin" on the page. But we can use AUs like this to pressure test the labels we've accepted. What if the house system isn't neutral? What if "once a Slytherin, always a Slytherin" is as false as "once a failure, always a failure" in our own lives? So, let's explore this version not as a replacement, but as a question: if one boy's choice at 11 can redeem a house, what choices are we underestimating in our own stories? If you want more stories like this, inviting deeper engagement, if one boy's choice can reshape a house, then the question becomes, what do we do with that? What if this isn't just a thought experiment we close the book on, but a starting point for your version of the story? This isn't a story about me handing you a definitive Slytherin, Harry canon replacement. It's an invitation. So, in the comments, I want to hear your timeline. Which moment in this version hit you hardest? Was it Harry walking past the Gryffindor table to sit beside Draco, with half the hall holding its breath? Was it that first time he calls Snape out in front of his own house? Or the night he chooses to protect a Slytherin first during the Battle of Hogwarts? Tell me which scene you're still turning over in your head. And then, go even narrower. Which character do you most want to spin off "what if" for in this timeline? Is it Draco, growing up with a best friend who keeps refusing to become the heir Voldemort wants? Is it Pansy, watching her house's reputation fracture from the inside? Is it Snape, forced to mentor the boy who is both Lily's son and Slytherin's unexpected champion? Means he has to confront his own house's rot, not just spy on Death Eaters in the shadows. I'd also love to see you debate the big decision points. Should Harry have trusted Draco more? Earlier, was he right to keep certain plans out of Slytherin hands? Or did that hesitation cost lives? Should this version of Slytherin be reformed from within? Or by the end of the war retired as a house that's done too much damage? If you're making a case, bring your receipts. Pull in canon moments, quote the Sorting Hat, Point to specific Draco or Snape scenes that back you up. This changes everything only if we can trace the dominoes. If you want to keep exploring this timeline beyond the video, there are so many ways to do it. You can read or write fan fiction that digs into those in-between years, Harry and Draco's first summer letters, Slytherin's reaction to the Chamber of Secrets when the heir might be one of their own, or a Tri-Wizard tournament where the green and silver champion is visibly torn between glory and survival. You can drag your friends into a late-night call and argue over whether Slytherin politics would derail Dumbledore's army. You can even re-watch the films and mentally color-code Harry in green, asking in every scene, what if his house badge changed this choice? And if you've enjoyed the pacing, the depth, the way we've stayed close to character while pushing the edges of canon, a gentle request: tap like, subscribe and share this with the one friend who always says, okay, but what if? It isn't about chasing numbers. It's about signaling that there's an audience for long-form, emotionally grounded AUs that treat the original story with respect. Because if there is, we can keep going. We can ask, what if Draco switched sides earlier and pulled Slytherin with him? What if Snape survived the war and had to live with Harry in his house? So, let's explore those next. Leaving the dungeon, a quiet goodbye to Slytherin Harry. So, let's explore one last image before we let this timeline go. Years have passed. The war is over. The dungeons are quieter now, the stone warmed by years of students who aren't planning revolutions in the dark, just homework and Hogsmeade trips. The Slytherin common room has windows charmed to show the lake in daylight, as well as in those eerie greens and blues. There are more plants, more cushions, fewer corners that feel like they're waiting to swallow you whole. On one of the long, low sofas near the fire, an older Harry sits, robe edged in green and silver that he never quite stopped wearing. He's not a boy anymore, but because this is Hogwarts, he's still a little bit every age he ever was under this ceiling. His scar has faded to a pale seam. His expression hasn't. He's watching the door. First years spill in behind the prefects, their eyes wide as the lake pressing in on the glass. One boy clutches his trunk handle so tightly his knuckles go white. A girl keeps glancing at the exits, counting them the way someone at home taught her to. Another is doing that very Slytherin thing of pretending he isn't terrified at all. Harry remembers that pressure in his ears, the weight of the water, and the hat's whisper, "You could be great, you know." He remembers choosing this house and hearing the silence at the Gryffindor table, the hiss of whispers at his back. This changes everything, the castle seemed to say. Means he had to decide over and over what kind of Slytherin Harry Potter was going to be. Now, he just shifts over and pats the space beside him. It's a small motion, almost invisible. One of the first years hesitates, then takes it. Harry leans in, voice low enough that only the boy can hear. "It feels worse the first night," he says. "Tomorrow you'll know where the best biscuits are hidden." The boy huffs a startled laugh. Some of the tension drains from his shoulders. Another first year, seeing that, drifts closer to the fire too. House unity, rebuilt one tiny act of permission at a time. This isn't a story about grand speeches or destiny. It's a story about a seat by the fire offered by someone who remembers needing it. In canon, we never meet this man. Our Harry walks different corridors, wears different colors, makes other mistakes. But imagining the boy who walked past the Gryffindor table and sat down beside Draco Malfoy means we see the original more sharply. His bravery, yes, but also his fear, his temper, the weight of choices he never got to make because the hat changed its mind at a whispered, "Not Slytherin." So where does that leave us? With a dungeon that isn't a dungeon anymore, and a Harry who learned to protect his house from the inside out, with a Slytherin crest that, in this timeline, carries his fingerprints alongside Snape's and Draco's, and a dozen unnamed kids who decided ambition didn't have to mean cruelty. We step back now, out of the green light, back to the scar we know, the Gryffindor Tower we've walked 100 times through page and screen. But you don't have to leave this Harry entirely. You can let him sit in the corner of your mind the next time you watch The Sorting. You can remember that somewhere, in some quiet branch of the multiverse, the boy who lived wears green and silver. And if that question stays with you, what if he always did? Then this story did its job. If you want more timelines, more what-ifs, that change how we see canon without breaking it, you know what to do. Subscribe. Share this with a friend who still argues about house placements. And tell me in the comments which impossible choice we should explore next.